All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our engineering work integrated learning information session. We host several of these every year to inform you about the program, the mechanics of the program, who's doing what are the expectations, how to apply, etc., etc. So there's a lot of information in this presentation here. It also partly takes into account that you've already been investigating what work integrated learning is. We will go over the basics, but of course you do need to fill some gaps in as well and make an effort to read information regarding work integrated learning. Before we get started, one more thing that you should be aware of is that all of this information is also available on Engineering Hub. So you have EMS 5 and EMS 4 versions. It doesn't matter which one you go to, they're pretty much the same in terms of expectations. The only thing that's different is the diagram explaining how you transition from undergraduate to will and postgraduate to will. But everything else is pretty much the same. And what I will say is that this information session, who should be in the audience? First of all, if you're a student, I'll classify into slightly different groups, but if you're an undergraduate student in your third year, that means that you will be applying for work integrated learning very soon, in the next few weeks, possibly tomorrow. Or if you are a postgraduate student in your penultimate semester, right? Penultimate semester means second last semester. This information session is very important to you. But here's a note. If you're an undergraduate student who's in first year or second year or something else, you're also welcome to stay here and listen. In fact, I highly encourage you, if you are a second year or first year, to join these info sessions, get the knowledge ahead of time, start preparing yourself. That's the best way to get the learning outcomes. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my colleagues, Steve and Mary, who is part of the college work integrated learning team, and my colleague Noor Rahim, who many of you have met before as well. And he handles a lot of the industry relationships that we have with companies and helps you guys transition into the program. So the three of us are going to present the ins and outs of the work integrated learning program today. And I'm just going to handball it over to my colleague, Steve, who is going to give us a brief introduction into what we're doing today.
Thanks, Eddie. So you can see here, we are covering quite a lot. We won't go through this list in detail for you, but we're just trying to make sure that after today, you guys have a sense of how the program works, some of the expectations, a bit of discussion of processes and timelines. Eddie will take you through the LMS and talk you through that, because that's quite an important feature of in terms of where you're going to get your information. So as Eddie said, Noor and I, we support Eddie's work and the academic staff in the subject. We work within the Science, Health, Engineering College. You probably won't work as much with me. You'll get to know Noor and Eddie quite well and the team, but I'll be in the background as well, helping with paperwork and with some of those industry connections as well. Just having a slight lag on the slides. So Eddie, I'm assuming a lot of the people here know you already, but do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think most people do know me, but in case you haven't bumped into me before, it'll be probably because of COVID-19. So my name's Eddie. I've been in the department since 2008 as a staff member, and I was a student at Trobe University back in the early 2000s. So I know Trobe in and out, and one of the things that I've focused on in my early career was developing the potential of various engineering students at Trobe University. It's what I do in the university, it's what I do out of the university as one of my hobbies as well. So the tips and hints that we're going to give you throughout what we do are very, very important. They come with a solid background of knowledge and years of experience, and a program that was designed to really help students gain employability. It's very, very unique. What we do here at Trobe University. There are not many other universities offering such a specific approach to work integrated learning. And what's important to state is that we have designed it with the input of professionals who have been doing this for a very long time. I'm an engineering student. I'm a former engineering student at Trobe. That means I am an engineer. I'm a practicing engineer. That means I work in industry as well as academia. I have several companies that I work in, several companies that I own. So I have wide industry experience that is very important for your professional development. So yes, that doesn't mean that you listen to everything that I say and take it as gospel, but there's a lot of valuable information that I'm going to share with you. And it should help you really position yourself to get yourself a work integrated learning position. There are no guarantees, but if you work hard and you listen to some of the advice that we give you, you should be on a really good position to secure yourself placement. So that's it for me. Thanks, Steve.
No problems. So as I mentioned before, this is the group that sort of support their subject as well. I might ask Noor to talk briefly about your role, Noor.
Yep, definitely. So my name is Noor Rahim. I am the program coordinator for the Work Integrated Learning program. It's always a mouthful saying that on the phone when I'm trying to introduce myself to organizations. And basically my role, as Eddie said before, is to help all of you transition into the workforce or into a placement with industry. I do this with the support of the people you see on the screen, Steve Mary, Tim Austin. A little bit about myself or my background. I'm an electronics engineer. I graduated from Trobe University. I graduated in 2018. I guess what makes me sort of an asset, not to toot my horn, to the WHEEL program is in my last year, in my honours thesis, I and Eddie went to Pennsylvania State University, and we basically did a benchmark for business attributes for engineering students in the employability space. So I have that experience there in the background, just by, I guess, different regions around the world. And I've brought that experience now to the Work Integrated Learning team. And I think this is now my 7th or 8th iteration of WHEEL. And I've seen a lot. I've seen mistakes. I've seen the pros and the cons of what students can do in specific situations. And as Eddie said, if you listen to us, there will be a high likelihood that you will succeed in the program and you will be employed later down the track. And we'll speak about that a little later on in the presentation. But that's it for me.
Cool. And just really quickly, as I said, you'll probably actually hear more from Noor and Tim than you will from me. Tim provides a lot of administration support. So when it comes time to submitting certain documents, you often will deal with Tim, and I will be in the background, often liaising with industry on placement agreements and some of that side of stuff as well. So we've got a bit of a summary here now, and I think Eddie and Noor will be really well placed to talk you guys through this, but we've got some stats and a bit of a summary of the program and the industry partners. So I might hand this part over to you,
Yeah.
Eddie and Noor.
All right, I can say a few words about this. The numbers look very impressive, guys, and this is really a culmination of the hard work that's gone into making this program such a success over the years. And that is that we have built such strong relationships with companies. Again, it's something that you can take away from this, is that, you know, everything that you do in life is really about relationships. It's about building networks. It's about making sure that you have quality rather than quantity. So it's very easy to spray the area and go out and ask companies, give us a placement, give us a placement. But what it really takes is developing strong relationships, which take time to really come to fruition. And that's what we've been able to do over these years. We've built these strong relationships with lots of companies all over the state, some international as well, but we tend to focus, if you can see that diagram of Victoria there, the map, we tend to focus in this particular region. So metropolitan Melbourne, and then all of those areas in sort of northwest to northeast Victoria. This is La Trobe University's catchment area besides metropolitan Melbourne. This does not exclude you from getting placements out of this zone, but this is where we have the strongest relationships and really get a lot of placements. But the most recent, I guess, success of this program is that we have been nominated for the Australian Financial Review Awards. These are the national awards, very, very prestigious awards, probably the most prestigious awards in this particular space that we work in. And we've been nominated for the Employability Award. So fingers crossed, we win this award. But I will say that winning this award is not just, you know, a reflection of the great work the staff are doing. It's really a reflection of the great work that previous students have done in the program and the great work that you guys will continue to do in the companies that you get placed. So it's our collective achievement. And that's why I always like to use the word we, representing you and us, because we're one big team. And Team La Trobe needs to deliver in order for these great things to happen. But you can see the stats there really. If you can go back one more second, the stats are really impressive, right? 90% of our students find employment post-placement. Even for international students, 70% find employment post-placement. No one has a record like that in Victoria. So we work really, really hard to achieve those figures, and we hope that you can also, you know, play a big role in helping us secure that. Some of the companies on the bottom there, they're not all the companies. It's not an exhaustive list. We had difficulties injecting all the logos in one slide. There are probably another 20 or 30 over the years that we've utilized. And there are some random companies that keep popping in every once in a while over the time. But yeah, very, very impressive statistics there. We can go to the next slide, Steve. Here's some feedback from our industry partners. And again, we can't list all of our industry partners, and I don't want to read through what they've said. But the bottom line is the program is very successful, and the feedback from industry is very, very impressive as well. Students do a fantastic job. The way the program is set up, the length of the program and what it gives to the company, what it gives to the student. It's such a win-win situation and very unique that we've been able to, embed this inside of our engineering programs at an early stage before the other universities started realizing, hey, this might be something that's worthwhile doing. We'll provide you with this information later on so you can have a little bit of a read. But as we said, we work with a variety of companies from large defense organizations like Thales and BAE to councils like City Greater Bendigo, robotics automation companies like Norris, companies in central Victoria, Furfield Engineering. If you've never heard of them, maybe some of you are laughing and thinking, I've heard of Furfield, the beer. Well, Furfield Engineering is one of the oldest companies in Victoria. It's been around for like 150 years. And they started making little water tanks back in the day when you needed to transport and cart water around central Victoria. They now make some of the largest silos in the state and also across the country. You've probably seen their silos when you're driving through various parts of Victoria for grain and milk and hazardous materials, enormous structures, so quite fascinating. And then, companies in Bendigo that, hold 85% of the market share when it comes to oxygen sensors and ceramic oxide fabricators. So variety of companies, lots of good feedback. Don't want to go into too much detail, but yeah, you're in good hands. And then the feedback, from students, there's lots of good stories that pop up all the time. One thing that Nora and I are consistently asking you guys to do is be vocal. Once you're out there, you're working in the company, you're doing some great things, you're getting good feedback from your employers, be vocal about it. These days, you cannot be silent. If you're doing good work, people need to know about it. I know sometimes you've been told, don't toot your horn too loud. Well, I'm telling you to change your mindset around that. You should toot your horn, especially if you're doing good stuff, because people will notice you and you can get jobs and opportunities that lead on from there. So these stories that we try to capture are really based on what you guys are doing. So the more that you tell us, the more that we can also boast about how great you are and what you're doing and sell you to industry, because that's essentially what we do here. We teach you and then we sell you to industry, but you also need to be able to sell yourself. And there's a couple of success stories here from various companies across the state. I won't go into what they've achieved, but you can see there that it's quite good. There's a few more as well, and probably on the left-hand side, one of the most significant ones, Ilhan Fakir, she got the chance, and not just her, Selena as well, the two students, they got the chance to meet the Premier, Daniel Andrews, and also a couple of other ministers in Victoria working on one of the largest underground metropolitan stations, train stations, that's currently being built. So a lot of exciting opportunities. Some people prefer these large organizations working on mega infrastructural projects, and other students like a more quiet office setting to work in. Sometimes you have the choice, sometimes you don't. But the most important thing to draw as an umbrella here is that everyone gets really good learning outcomes at the end of this program, and everyone is in a much better position to get a job, full-time job, if you don't already secure one while you're in the program, post-program. So those are some success stories just to give you guys a heads up on how good this program is. All right, I want to hand it back over to Nora and Steve now.
Cool, thanks, Eddie. So this is just a very quick snapshot, and I think a lot of you will know this already, but WHEEL stands for Work Integrated Learning. You might hear other terms, industry-based learning, work-based learning, placement, IBL, but just for the purposes of this program, we're calling it Engineering WHEEL. And really it's just about you getting a placement in industry, as you've just seen. So it does vary. The activities you undertake will vary based on where you're doing your placement. But it's important to remember that in virtually all cases, unless you're actually employed by the company, you're out there, to learn primarily. You're there because the company is wanting to support your learning. Of course, while you are there, you will be helping them and contributing things to the company, but you're there primarily for your learning, and you'll be completing 2 30 credit point subjects at La Trobe for the duration of your 6-month placement.
Steve, can I just add one comment to there, because a lot of students go in here thinking, okay, work integrated learning is an industry placement, it's an internship. It is and it isn't. And I'm going to lean more towards the thing that it isn't, because sometimes students get into their mind that, okay, it's a classic internship, it's just for 6 months and I get some credit for it. Don't let that statement define work integrated learning, because that's not what it is, okay? Engineering work integrated learning at Trobe University is 6 months of training in industry, basically learning in industry. It is not an internship. An internship is something that you will on your own arrange, and some students already have done that before, where you get paid to do some work. Sometimes it's unpaid, but most of the time you're getting some sort of financial compensation. What we're doing here is we're changing the environment in which you're learning, right? Instead of learning in 4 subjects, that means labs, lectures, online tutorials, whatever it might contain in this situation, we're changing that environment to an actual work learning environment. So you are part of a company and you're learning within the walls of that company, but you still have to contribute academically and so on. We'll talk about that later on. So I just want that to be very clear with everyone. We're just changing the environment in which you're learning, but it is not an internship per se, although it can be perceived that way. Thanks, Steve.
It's a really good point, because I think companies also, the best placements are the companies that view it that way as well. So just another quick couple of bits of information here. Generally speaking, we talk about 800 hours of placement for each of these industry-based learning placements. So it works out to roughly 20 weeks full-time. There's variation there, there's some flexibility there, but you're essentially going to be out for about 6 months full-time with a few weeks off here and there to get you up to your 800 hours. And we're dealing with what we're calling placement period 1 coming up, which is meaning that the bulk of these placements we're discussing today would be beginning in January. There may be some small number of exceptions that begin earlier, especially if you're able to source yourself a placement in industry. It may begin in December or even November, but the vast majority of what we're arranging is looking at a January 2021 start. And of course, that does have some kind of dependency on COVID-19 and what's happening. It's certainly, COVID has thrown our timelines out a bit this year, but January is the plan. There is also a scholarship as part of the program for most or for many students. So students who secure a placement with our partners are usually eligible for a scholarship from industry, but we can cover that in a bit more detail later on. So at this point, I might, in a moment, just stop my screen share and hand over to Eddie to do a bit of a talk through, but this is really just drawing your attention to the LMS Engineering Hub, which Eddie has mentioned is a key resource, and it's where you're going to be living there basically to get your information. So Eddie, if you're happy, I might stop the screen share and you can share your screen on the LMS.
All right, guys. So what's important here is, so first of all, there are several LMS pages that you need to be aware of. And the one that you should all have access to is Engineering Hub. So Engineering Hub has various pieces of information related to what you need to know before you actually apply for work integrated learning. Now, once you actually get enrolled, once you actually get a company position, et cetera, you will then get access to the actual subject page of LMS. So I just want to make sure that you understand the difference between those two. We have tried to place as much information as possible on the Engineering Hub so that you have access to everything that you need to successfully apply for a work integrated learning position. Okay, so those are the two differences. When do you get access to this other page, this subject page? When you have a contract signed off saying that, yes, the company is taking you on board. You will not get access beforehand. What you will get access to is, while you are waiting for that position, everyone should also be enrolled in the 4th year or the master's projects, okay? This might confuse you a little bit, but I'll explain it in a second before I go into what the pages contain. By default, you are all going to enroll in a 4th year project or a master's project or master's elective subjects, right? But everyone needs to be enrolled in those by default. Now, if you do get a placement with the company, you unenroll from that subject and you enroll, and Noor will take care of this part for you, and you enroll in the actual work integrated learning subjects. Why do we do it this way? Because sometimes the negotiation with the company may take longer than what we envisaged. Right now is a perfect example. We've been negotiating the hell out of these positions, and COVID-19 stage 4 restrictions have made it extremely difficult to do that. But let's say that in January, situation is a little bit better, you know, things will go back to normal. There still is a negotiation period. Sometimes things don't line up the way we want them to. Things are delayed by a couple of weeks, sometimes a month. We can be very flexible. What's important is that nothing is guaranteed. We have had 1 or 2 situations where a company has pulled out in the last minute. These things happen. It's not our fault. It's just the circumstances within the company that sometimes dictate whether yes or no. It's very unlikely, but it can happen. If you're enrolled in a subject, i.e. if you're enrolled in a project subject by default, you should be continuing down this path until someone taps you on the shoulder and says, we've now got a confirmed position for you. We've got the interview. That way you're not losing out if you don't get that position. You're still continuing with your project. Now, very unlikely to happen, but it's possible. So you've got to have all the options on the table. And part of our job is to make sure that we de-risk as much as possible for you and for us as well. We'll talk about the mechanics of what goes on there later on. I'm going to share my screen as well in a second, just to give you guys an overview of what LMS actually looks like and what information is available to you. So here we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. Just give me the thumbs up, Noel, if you can see what I'm seeing. Yep, all good. All right, so this is now the subject page, right? The subject page is different to what you see on LMS Engineering Hub. But I am going to open up that page for you guys as well, if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Here it is. Okay, so here you have 2 subjects. You should have EMS 5, WLA, WLB, and EMS 4, WLA, WLB. Please go to these pages, familiarize yourself. There's a lot of information here, right? There's diagrams explaining how the whole thing works. It's transitions, what's expected of you, deadlines, examples, CVs, everything that you need. I mean, I can't say everything because there's always something additional, but a lot of good information here that you need access to. If something is not here and you think you need that information or you think you need more input, just please reach out to Noah, myself, or Steve, or anyone else in our team. We'll be happy to help you do that. But we think it's pretty comprehensive. There's enough information there for you guys to navigate through that. So I'm not going to go through that page because that page is not so important. So what do you need to know about work integrated learning now? Some of you may have spoken to some of your colleagues from the past. This is perfectly fine. A few things have changed in work integrated learning, and I should talk about changed because if you've spoken to other students, you may get the wrong impression of what work integrated learning is. So as part of work integrated learning, there are assessments that you need to complete. And this is the part where I mentioned that this is not just another industry placement, because in internship situations, you have no obligation towards the university. In this case, you do have an obligation to the university. You are an enrolled student. And because you're an enrolled student, it means that you have to complete certain assessment pieces, which then give you a grade at the end of work integrated learning. So you do get graded, right? It's not just you get a tick in the box to say to complete the placement. Now, as part of this placement, the assessment pieces are tailored towards Engineers Australia Stage 1 competencies. If you haven't familiarized yourself with the Stage 1 competencies, I can briefly mention them here, but it's something that you should look into. These are the guiding principles and quality assurance measures that are put into place in Australia by the governing body of all engineers, Engineers Australia. It ensures, and there are 16 of these competency areas that you need to look at. This ensures that no matter where you graduate, if you graduate from an accredited degree, like ours, or any other degree in Australia, it guarantees that you meet certain standards, right? So that we don't have one course being skewed towards one direction, the other one to another direction. There's a quality assurance measure put into place. Now, what does that mean for you? What does that mean for us as the administrators? 2 things. For you, it means that you can rest assured that you're graduating from an institution that actually knows what it's doing. The results are always the best way to measure the quality, and our students getting employment, 90% of our students having jobs, that's a quality measure that you cannot argue against. But what are the pieces that are put in between to get you from fresh high school student or fresh master's student all the way through I have a job? Well, that's the part that's on us. And we work through tirelessly to make sure the content meets those expectations. But let's touch on work integrated learning and what are the expectations there. Work integrated learning at Trobe University replaces or runs in parallel to what's called a capstone project experience. The term capstone meaning that it's the one thing that binds together the knowledge that you have attained in the first few years of your studies, right? Sometimes you feel like you're learning random topics. You're learning mathematics and physics and this and that. How does it all come together? It comes together in the work integrated learning placement when you go to a company. It does not mean that you're going to use everything that you've learned. You never use everything that you've learned because you don't know where you're going to end up. So you have to have a broad set of problem solving skills. You have to have an open mind about where you could potentially go. And you really don't know which industry you're going to end up in specifically. You know, even in civil engineering, there are hundreds of different streams of civil engineering that you can go into. We can talk about them later on. So what we do here is we ensure that what you do as an assessment piece in work integrated learning is very closely aligned to what you would do if you were doing a capstone project experience in the department as a project. So you are required to, as part of your industry placement, to actually undertake some research work and then write a thesis. A minor thesis is the final output of your work integrated learning experience. And that minor thesis, if we take that and we take a capstone project experience, someone who didn't go into industry, and we compared it to, they should, at least in quality, measure up one against each other. This is why you have an academic supervisor who supervises you while you're out in the company, and you have a meeting every 2 weeks, and you have an industry supervisor who's supervising you on a daily basis, providing you with instructions on what to work on, how to do it, etc., etc. So those two work hand in hand. Now, this seems like a lot of work. It seems like a challenge. I'm going to be very clear about this. It is a challenge and it is a lot of work, but that's why work integrated learning, the program, is given only to best students, because it does require you to work under pressure. It does require you to meet deadlines. It does require you to satisfy industry expectations. It does require you to meet academic expectations. And it requires you to balance this workload, which is quite large. And that's why it's not for everyone. Everyone has a chance to get it, but not everyone gets it. You need to be sure that you want to embark on such a venture. It's highly valuable. The results are incredible, but it's not for everyone. You need to be able to really go in and do a good job. Now, because of this assessment piece importance, everything that you do beforehand, if I said at the end of the 6 months, you write a thesis up and you submit that and you get graded, there are little bits and pieces along the way which form the bigger story. Now, what's changed since last year? Work integrated learning now is broken up into 2 subjects, right? WLA and WLB. There's a 4 in front if you're undergraduate, there's a 5 in front if you're a postgraduate, but in essence, it's the same thing. What's expected of you in subject 1 and subject 2, and why are there 2 subjects? It caused confusion for many people. As far as the company is concerned, nothing's changed, right? The company still has you for 6 months. The company does not actually notice the changes internally. Why did they bring about this change? The university felt that having a student enroll in a 60 credit point subject with the potential to fail a 60 credit point subject was too much of a risk. So they split the experience down into 2 30 credit point subjects so that if in case you failed, right, very unlikely, I don't think we've had maybe 1 student fail over the last 4 or 5 years. But if you do, that you don't fail the entire 60 credit points, that you can fail the first 30 credit points and then enroll in 2 subjects after that and finish off something else. So that is an important aspect. If you do not perform well in the first 3 months, you can be kicked out of the program. Essentially, you get a grade at the end of your first credit points and then you exit. We hope that's not going to happen. It's very unlikely to happen. But it can happen, right? Anything's possible. Who would have thought COVID-19 would shut down the world? And yet it happened. So please be aware that there are 2 subjects. You are automatically enrolled in both, okay? You don't enroll in one and the other. This is not 2 semesters. It's 2 subjects, 30 credit points in 1 semester. But you complete A before you do B. It's simple as that. So let's talk about what the expectations are in A and what the expectations are in B. If you have questions, by the way, feel free to put them up in the chat. and Q&A area, and Noor will answer those questions for you. So I'm going to show you WLA first as a subject. Where are we? Here we go. Okay, it has 3 assessments, right? There's 3 assessments in WLA and there's 3 assessments in WLB. Before you confuse yourself, currently, if you go to the web page of all the subjects, you will see that WLB has 4 assessments, but please rest assured, I've combined 2 of those assessments into 1, so you only have 3 and 3. And some of those assessments are pretty minor. They're not actually very, very big. So you'll see that it's not overly complicated. So assessment 1 is probably one of the most important ones as part of this placement. Sorry, here's WLA. And why is it the most important one? Because this is what we call your project plan and your scope report. So first of all, you know, what is a scope report? Why is a project plan? And why are we doing 2 in 1? So a scope report is a document that allows you to really reflect on who you're working for, what your role is, what are your responsibilities, who's your supervisor, what does your team look like, what does the company do? It's about defining the work environment that you're in. You're scoping, you're creating a scope. What is it that I do and what is it that I don't do, right? Who do I work with and who don't I work with, and so on. You need to define these things. And it's very important because it really sets you up for the rest of the program to understand the mechanics in the company. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is the project plan. So let's talk about the project before we talk about the project plan. As part of work integrated learning, you will undertake a project as part of your placement. How does that actually work in the company? Most of the companies, when you come in, they'll want you to perform a certain job. That's what you're there to do. You're learning on the job, you're learning within the walls of the company. However, as part of this placement, you have to pick one topic. You will work on many things in the company, by the way, but you will pick one of those that in parallel to what you do in the company, you will then investigate, conduct research, and publish a thesis as part of this entire experience. It's always good when what you pick as a project topic closely aligns with a day-to-day type exercise or activity within the company. And I'll give you examples, and I'll show you some example CV. I'll give you some example theses and project plans. You've got them on LMS here as well. But if you can do that when you sit down with your supervisor, supervisors in theory should know what the expectations are from La Trobe University. That's part of the job that Noor and I do. However, if your supervisor is not aware of the expectations, please let us know. Why would they not be aware? Because companies change supervisors, right? Last semester, for example, Spire had supervisor X, and next semester, Spire as a company has supervisor Y. Sometimes the supervisors talk to each other internally, but sometimes they don't. And this is perfectly fine. It's our job to make sure they're aware. But if you notice that they don't know what you're talking about, just let us know, and we will then speak to them and explain what the expectations are. You pick one particular topic, you write a project plan. So your project plan is outlining what is the topic that you're going to research, investigate, right? What literature exists out there? What are you collecting about this particular experience? And then lays out a plan on how you're going to conduct yourself over the next 5 to 6 months to deliver that one final deliverable, which is your thesis, right? That's what the project plan is. It includes a budget. It includes a Gantt chart, planning out various processes, dependencies on each other. It includes a risk analysis. You know, what are the risks involved in your project? What mitigation strategies do you have in place? You should know about some of this stuff because you've gone through subjects like engineering enterprise, engineering management, et cetera, et cetera. You should have learned some of these things in there, and that's why we do them with you guys. So that's the essentials of this project plan. It is worth 50% of WLA, so it's quite a significant assessment piece, and it's normally due 6 weeks after you commence your placement. So as soon as you're commencing your placement, you should be investigating and seeing what needs to happen. Your academic supervisor will help you greatly in achieving this, and very likely the academic supervisors for you guys will also be Bandita Mainali, Adam Consol, and myself. So Bandita and Adam are your primary supervisors, and I'm your secondary supervisor and overarching supervisor. So I have an overview of everyone's work, and I have the final say on your grades, etc., etc. And I do the actual variations on top of everything else that they do. But your first point of contact for academic supervision is very likely going to be either Adam or Bandita, depending on whether you're doing civil or construction management, or whether you're doing electronics, whether you're doing industrial engineering or manufacturing, or any of those other areas that are not related to civil and construction engineering per se. Okay, you can read the details of all of this once you're enrolled. The second assessment piece as part of WLA is a written progress report. So the progress report is really supposed to give us an update at the end of WLA. So that's another 6 weeks after you've submitted your actual project plan. How are you going? What's going on? What issues are you encountering? Where have you had success? Where have you not had success? You know, just give us an update on what's going on. And based on that update and your supervisor's actual interactions, we know how you're progressing. And then I've included lots of information here for you guys, lots of examples of what a progress report looks like, right? Guidelines on how to write them, assessment criteria. So everything is online for you. It's not like you're going to go in blindly and not know what to write up. There's plenty of information here for you, including why it's important to write progress reports so that we can mitigate any risks that are upcoming and deal with them in a timely fashion. Okay, so that's due at the end of your 12 weeks, which is essentially WLA. And assessment 3 is a video presentation of your progress. So your video presentation and this one here really are very closely aligned. So you basically need to do an oral presentation of what it is that you're writing. There are some details that you need to highlight. I won't go into too much to them. They're not too difficult to do. All the information's here for you, including assessment criteria. And there are some videos that we can show you later on about what's expected of you from there. Now, one important aspect that is to be done before you commence is research webinars. I will actually make these research webinars available to you even before you start officially WLA, WLB, because I think it's important that you understand what's expected of you from a research perspective. We ran 4 research webinars, and these webinars show you everything that you need to know on how to write a research technical report from A to Z, all the way through. There are 4 of them. They're detailed. There's about 1.5 hours to 2 hours of content in each one, including Q&A. You need to go through them. Your supervisors will be very upset if you don't watch these videos and ask them questions which have already been answered in those videos. That's why we've put them together, is to prepare you on how to write that. And it's something that you need to watch before you go forward. Okay, WLB. So let's assume that you've now completed 12 weeks of your placement, right? You've submitted all your assessments. There are 2 weeks for the academics to assess your final work and to say, yes, person X or person Y are progressing perfectly fine. They can now transition into WLB. Keep in mind, the company does not notice the difference. You're just going through from an academic point of view. Unless you're performing badly, Nora and I will know about it. We can pull you from the program. We have done that in the past on several occasions. We've pulled students out of the program because of the lack of performance. There are lots of reasons why. We'll talk about them later on. But one of the most common ones is arriving late to work. 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour. It's happened. It happens. It's not like class. If you remember when you had me, when I taught you in whatever subjects I did, when I say don't come late, it's a reflection of your professionalism. Companies will not tolerate it, especially if they're looking for reasons to let you go because you're not performing. They will not tolerate a single minute. My advice to you is arrive early, 15 minutes early, half an hour early. You might be thinking to yourself, but well, I'm not contracted to be there for an extra half an hour. You may not be, but other students are. And they're going to look for students that are going the extra mile, putting in the extra half an hour. If you love what you're doing, you put the extra work in, it guarantees that you'll be in a much better position to get there. So don't be late. We'll talk about that later on. When you transition to WLB successfully, the primary assessment piece here is your thesis. However, before you get to the thesis, you also have something that's quite important, which is the Work Integrated Learning Symposium. Now, the symposium, depending on whether you're doing this in semester 1 or semester 2, what you're looking at here is WLA for the master's cohort, which is happening this semester. So their work integrated learning symposium will coincide with our engineering and IT expo. This won't be the case for all of you who are on this call, because you will be going into work integrated learning in what Steve called period A. And period A, or part A, is from January to June, July. And part B is from June, July to December, which is the students that are already in right now. But the Work Integrated Learning Symposium is a great way to showcase what you're doing to the whole world. We organize an event. Now, during COVID-19, we can't organize a physical event. We're doing a virtual event, which is going to be fantastic. But in reality, what we do is a face-to-face event where you guys produce an A0 poster of what you're doing in the company. That poster needs to be vetted by the company, so you're not releasing information which is confidential. And we bring other students from first, second year, third year, master's level, other courses. We bring industry, we bring your industry supervisors, your companies, and we bring other partners, other academics to see the great work that you're doing. This is a great way to sell yourself further to others while you're there. Fantastic event. You have an opportunity to see what the other colleagues are doing and feed each other with information on how to perform better. Another important aspect of work integrated learning placements. But most of all, most importantly, as part of all of this is, you get to boast about how good of work that you're doing in the company. And again, I say it, you have to do that. It's a vital part of selling yourself to the world. So what are the expectations from an academic point of view? You will produce a poster and you will present that poster at the Work Integrated Learning Symposium. It's worth 15%. You get marked on the poster and you get marked on how you explain your poster. All the details are included there. The second and most vital piece of assessment is your thesis. It's worth 65% of WLB. It's quite a significant assessment piece in the whole subject, but particular in WLB. There are lots of good examples on how to write them, the structures, right? There are examples here, and there are 3 examples here. I'm going to pop up a couple just to show you. You had the opportunity to listen to Ethan Doyle. He's one of our recent graduates. So Ethan Doyle worked in a company called Geotechnical Testing Services, GTS. Obviously, they're a geotechnical company. And his research thesis as part of the company was evaluation of modulus-based in-situ testing using a lightweight deflectometer for the quality control of compaction. So for those of you that are not in that particular area, what he was doing was looking at compaction processes in soil structures, obviously geotechnical engineering, and he was using a new piece of equipment to look at how and what results they can produce from that and how it impacts the industry. So that was his research project. Very valuable to the company. He was working in the company, but it delivered that. You can see the thesis. It's quite lengthy. There's a lot of details here. It's about 40 pages of work, but you've got plenty of examples. So no excuses as to what a good thesis needs to look like. There are other examples here from other disciplines. Okay, this is one from Alex Vollerberg, who worked in a circular economy type project with recycling of carpets. Quite a cool project that he started here as well. And you've also got another one here from Julian Herniak, who was working for Integra Systems. And he was designing some very, very fancy automated equipment. You can look into the details. Anyways, all of this is online for you. The last assessment piece, which is a very small assessment piece, but a very important one as well, is an exit interview. So we want to prepare you for what's coming after work integrated learning. Although most of you will get jobs with the companies that you're doing your work integrated learning placement with, you may want to change companies after that, or the company may not want to take you on as well. So there are other alternatives. We need to have an exit interview to analyze how you performed, what you learned, what you didn't learn, what your expectations are, and set you up for the next phase. So the exit interview will be conducted in a similar manner as the entry interview. So all of you will need to do an interview before you enter the work integrated learning shortlist. And this will be done using what's called the big interview. Noel will talk more about the big interview in a few minutes when we get to his section. But you will also use the big interview as an exit interview. That means there are several questions that are pre-recorded, and you answer those questions by recording a video of yourself answering those questions. We then go through and give you an assessment based on that. The same way that you would be assessed in a company, if you were entering the company or exiting the company, they would be giving you an assessment on that. So that's exactly what we're going to be using. And of course, there are some example questions and so on that you can review here. But those are all of the assessment pieces for WLA and WLB. The primary academic outcome is a thesis. The primary student outcome is gaining employment, right? And the primary outcome for all of us is that you learn something in this experience and really set yourself up for the professional world that's coming after you graduate. That's work integrated learning in a nutshell. It's embedded. And what makes it unique in comparison to other universities, and what we like to boast about, is that there are other work integrated learning programs. If you type that in on Google, you'll find lots of them. But ours is 60 credit points. That means you're getting credit for an entire semester. It's 6 months. There is a $10,000 scholarship associated with it. And this is the really unique part. Your capstone project, your capstone thesis is intertwined with the experience. That's what makes it unique. It means that you don't have to do another capstone experience once you complete work integrated learning, that you kill. Well, I like to use the kill because some people love animals, but essentially you're taking care of multiple problems with one initiative. And that's what makes it unique, and that's what makes it so, so good. It sets you guys up for a future career in engineering, and there are lots of good examples of that in our program here. So that's it from me, guys, explaining what the subject is and how it works. The details and so on we'll talk about later, but it gives you a good heads up on what's expected from you, so that you're not saying later on, oh, this is too much work. It is a lot of work, but you need to toughen up and you need to get ready for the real world, because the real world can be a lot harsher than the academic world here. I'm going to pass the word back now to Steve and to Noor to handle the next phase of our information session.
Cool, thanks, Eddie. So I'll just go jump back into my screen share. But yeah, there's a heap of information there. So I think this one, when it pops up, I might see if Noor's happy to talk through this one. This is just a little bit about, and Eddie's sort of covered this already, but who is eligible for the wheel subjects?
All right. So I guess as you guys can sort of see, to all 71 students that are on the Zoom chat, there is a ton of work to do. It's not a walk in the park. It's definitely not something you can do last minute. And I remember being, when I was a student and, you know, there was a vector calculus subject or an NLA subject or a CTE subject. It was to study a week or 2 weeks before, in hopes obviously of either getting, you know, passing or getting a good mark. So if you're thinking that you're going to use the same strategy for work integrated learning, I'm telling you, you will fail from day one. So please be aware of all these assessment tasks, be aware of your own time management skills, reread everything that is already on LMS, and have a think about, can you actually commit yourself to completing most of these assessment tasks and also undertaking placement? It is a big ask, but I think it is an important experience to have as a student for you to enter the workforce, because you will, once you enter the workforce, you'll be working on projects, you'll be working on deadlines, there's a lot of stress and pressure in that environment. And what a way to basically simulate that stress and pressure in your final year as an undergraduate student. And after that, once you've experienced all of that and you understand the lingo and you can also speak like an engineer, when you go to that interview after you graduate, you're already miles ahead of that engineering graduate from Melbourne University, from Monash University. You're not, maybe you're 6 to 12 months ahead of them. And as I said, we've had some experiences, as Eddie has said, of students, now working at Boeing, students working at Bombardier, students working at Metro. Thankfully, even during this whole pandemic, and this was very recent, after all our students completed their work integrated learning with Metro, Metro said, look, sorry, we can't hire these students on for the next 6 months. There was a lot of toing and froing. There was a lot of communicating with them, myself, Steve and Eddie. And, finally, we had all 10 students go on to casual contracts with Metro Trains during a pandemic. It was unheard of. Not a lot of people are losing jobs. But once again, what the managers were telling us was these students have been trained up. Why would we lose an asset like that to another company or another organization that might be working either in the rail or civil engineering space? So in regards to eligibility, so yes, as Eddie also said, if you're an undergraduate student, you must be in third year or about to complete your third year, transitioning onto your fourth year. We have a lot of questions from students in regards to, okay, I failed some subjects. What can I do? How can I do it? And we get a ton of them. Usually the prerequisite for this, we used to say, was 360 credit points, but obviously some of you just for whatever reason might not have it. It's not the end of the world. It is a case-by-case basis. And please, we also get another question. If you have failed a subject or if you need to do credits, you can't do that in parallel with taking work integrated learning. I can't stress that enough. If you're thinking of doing vector calculus during work integrated learning, it is one of the most difficult things to do. So that's that. As I said, case-by-case basis. If you have failed a subject or if you need to do a subject, please get in contact with Eddie or even your course coordinator. I highly recommend your course coordinator. It's just the easiest option.
Yeah,
right there.
If I can just add in there as well, that your course coordinator is the gatekeeper for this. If your course coordinator lays out a plan for you on how you can complete the remainder of the subjects that you may have failed, as far as Nora and I are concerned, if you failed one or two subjects prior to WLA, WLB, that's okay. It doesn't stop us from including you in the program. However, we are not the ones that you need to be concerned about. You need to have a plan on how you're going to actually complete your studies if you complete WLA, WLB next semester. And the only person that can actually approve that is your course coordinator. So we will need an approval from your course coordinator before you even apply. I want to see that you have spoken to your course coordinator, that there is an actual plan on how you're going to do that. So please take note of that right now so that Nora and I don't have to send 50 emails after that. If you have failed subjects from first year to third year, one or two, please get approval from your course coordinator that you are okay to enroll in WLA, WLB, and attach that, include that somewhere in your application, expression of interest. That will save a whole lot of headaches for both of us later on, and it means that we can easily transition you through. We don't want to get into a nasty situation where you didn't get that approval and we have to say, sorry, we can't enroll you. Do it ahead, do it now, find out what you need to do, okay? Thank you.
Exactly what Eddie said right there. And just in regards to honesty through the whole application. I don't want to be in a situation where you've lied about something and then I just find out. I find out because I run all your names through the system. So I know what your WAM averages are. I know which subjects you have failed or passed. I know basically everything just because I have access to the system. And I don't care, to be honest, if you failed subjects. I actually do not give an absolute shit, because as a student, you're 18, you're fresh out of high school. The last thing on your mind right now is trying to do, NLA or physics in your first year and C programming when you have no clue. Some of you still might not have a clue on where you want to go in life. So we don't judge. All we care about really is how hungry are you for an engineering position, and have you listened to all the training that you have gone through in regards to EEP and ITI? Have you taken all that on board? Can we present you to an organization? That's all I care about. Now, technical is good, but my experience, Eddie's experience, Steve's experience from speaking with industry, it's been technical we can teach. We can always teach it, but it's the soft skills that are very difficult to teach. And if you've excelled in these subjects and you've gone out of your way to do extracurricular activities and, you're volunteering or you're working part-time somewhere, or, you even work in retail, we found that those students always succeed the most. And that's just because, they have good emotional intelligence and good stakeholder management skills. So very, very important. In the other slide, there was now the master's students. Now, the master's students are a small cohort in this usually round for expression of interests. But these are students usually who have come through the middle of the year or enrolled through the middle of the year. So once again, this is your second last semester and will be your last semester before you graduate. So that's the only reason you would apply. So just remember that once again, it is your second last semester and work integrated learning will be your last semester before you graduate. And that's the only reason you should be applying. If you're a master's student and you're still in first year and you apply, once again, I have seen some students do stuff like that. I will look at their credit points and I'll be like, well, obviously they've not listened to what I, Eddie, and Steve have said in this chat. And it gives us red flags, because if you're not understanding the instructions now, how can I present you in industry? So just please be extra careful when you're creating these EOIs or submitting these EOIs. Read the content, make sure where you are, put a lot of effort into it. It's not, it shows me how much you care about where you want to be in the future. Next slide, Steve. So this one, just important considerations. So the offer of a will placement is not guaranteed and up to industry. I can't stress that enough. We've had situations where, we always have a surplus of positions for our students, but for whatever reason, 2 or 3 students in the undergraduate cohort just don't make it. And the reason is, it's not me making the decision. It's not Eddie or Steve. It's basically industry that make that decision. And it's up to industry to make that decision where we have no influence on it. We do this because at the end of the day, they're paying for a scholarship. They're giving you guys a scholarship. So it is a competitive process. And what this also allows, it also allows for you guys to experience what it's like when you guys enter the workforce. See, when you guys enter the workforce and you guys apply for a position and it goes right to that HR manager, you either get an interview or you don't. You don't send an email to the HR manager saying, hey, hello, why haven't I gotten an opportunity to interview? That HR manager will never reply back. I guarantee you that. But we're very lucky to be in a position where we are working to develop all of you to be as professional engineers as possible. So it's very important that, we do give a second and third round, depending on obviously what the demand is for industry. But if we give you a second round and that's also negative, we know that it's maybe not industry and it's the student. And as I've said, we have had experiences like that. And unfortunately, there's only so many opportunities where we can give you before we have to pull the plug and say, look, I think we have to now transition you into project, unfortunately. But we've done the very best to give you opportunities. And that's our guarantee. It's to help you get you opportunities, because it's also very difficult right now in the current circumstances to sort of, network and try to have these opportunities. But we're there we've already got these established network, established partnerships, and we basically bring them to you guys on a silver platter. And all you guys have to do is basically prepare yourselves as much as possible for these interviews.
And it's worth saying that no good students have ever not gotten a work integrated learning placement. That's and right. What we mean by good students, not necessarily mean the grades, right? Commitment. As I mentioned in the chat here, right? Having that attitude that you're a go-getter, right? Positive attitude, really preparing yourself for the professional environment. None of those students have ever not gotten a placement. And the few that we say that don't get it, they were given numerous tries. We did give people advice in advance. You didn't get through. It's really up to the industry to say yes or no. If you don't believe us, you'll believe the industry when they don't let you in. But most of the students do get placements because they work towards our expectations. And it's very, very clear. You can look at the students that have gotten the placements versus the students that haven't, and you can clearly see a difference between their attitudes, their go-getter, hunger for success, et cetera, et cetera. You will clearly see that. So, it's very, very straightforward, but you do have to put the work in and work towards it. As Noor highlighted, can't express it enough times. It's up to you. It's really in your hands. We put it in a platter for you, and all you got to do is carve it and eat it. And most of you do that. Some of you can't hold a fork and knife in your hands, and unfortunately, that happens as well.
That's awesome.
And just that last point there, I think it is worth noting that COVID-19 has given us some new challenges. We've had to run some placements this year in online mode, and because we just don't know, we don't know what's going to happen. I really hope that by January, we will all be in a better position and companies will be back on site across the board, and that's the hope. But just keep in mind that everything we're saying is somewhat dependent on what happens with COVID in terms of how many positions and especially whether they're able to occur on site. But we'll just have to play that one by ear a little bit.
Also, I can't stress that enough, also, just in regards to COVID-19 and the restrictions. There is an expectation that, if you're in retail, you've either lost a job or you're in a sector that, that has lost a job. Some students maybe have this expectation that we can just create jobs and bring them. When stage 4 is very restrictive right now in regards to what can happen, where we can go, and basically which sectors have been closed or are operating at 2/3 of capacity. So always put that into the back of your mind. We're doing the best we can, and we're hoping that COVID will the restrictions will loosen up a little bit, and fingers crossed there's a vaccine by December, January, and everything gets rolling. But we can't foresee what will happen in the future. We're basically trying to make you guys as prepared as possible, but also be patient with us in regards to what might happen in the next 4 to 6 months. As Eddie said, we never knew COVID was going to happen, and all of a sudden it has happened, and it's basically changed most of our lives. So as I said, please be patient during this whole process. Next slide. This one is for our international students, and we get a lot of questions in regards to 40 hours of paid employment per fortnight. That's what they're entitled to do, basically, to work. And how does the 800 hours of work integrated learning, is that allowable, basically? And the simple answer is yes, it is allowed, because this work integrated learning placement is aligned with credit points, and it's aligned with a core elective in your undergraduate course or even postgraduate course, and it is allowed. So there are no issues there, and we've got the certain provisions and permission to allow this. Now, this is a big one. I know this is Eddie's favorite topic. I could just see his eyebrows go up a little bit because he saw the word self-sourced. So I'm going to go over this very quickly, but I will jump in because I think this is actually a very, very, very important part, especially right now with COVID. This is a blessing in disguise. Okay, I'm just going to say this. People are at home on their laptops on LinkedIn. That's all they're doing. As in, I hope that's not all they're doing, but they've got it on a screen and they're at home and they have the time to answer questions. They have the time to network. So think about that before I sort of get into this, and then I know Eddie will definitely speak about that further. So what is a university source placement? Very simple. We have a number of industry partners, and we basically match the student with what the industry partner wants. We shortlist the students that are basically required to go to an interview. They're interviewed. Either they're accepted. They're accepted. We proceed with paperwork, and the student begins their placement. If for whatever reason you have not been accepted, what we call is you go to round 2, and round 2 is basically a next opportunity. Most of our undergraduate students pre-COVID were given a second opportunity. Actually, all of them were given a second opportunity. Some were even given a third opportunity. So this was, remember, when it's pre-COVID. And by the second opportunity, about maybe 90% of those students that failed the first round got the placement. But as I said before, some of the students, 2 or 3 out of all that whole cohort, just didn't get through. So once again, very simple. Industry partners, they're our industry partners. We match you with a company, and then we basically go on with that interview. We do have a list that will be put onto LMS shortly in regards to who our industry partners are. But in regards to this next topic, self-sourcing, and this is just an FYI for all of you, you cannot self-source from our industry partner list. So these are specifically a list of our companies that we have relationships with, and we just do not allow you to go up to these companies and say, hey, I want to self-source. So please, I can't stress that enough. Now, this is, as I said, our favorite topic to speak about, self-sourcing. And if you're a hustler and you're a go-getter and you want to sort of build a little brand for yourself, I guess this is one of our favorite topics, and it's definitely mine, because I'm a firm believer in selling your skills, selling the attributes you have, and basically marketing yourself to the maximum ability. Lauren was a great example of this, who posted a nice LinkedIn status and basically was given a job. from it. I've spoken to Abdullah on the phone a couple of times. He's another student who has given me a call and said, how do I self-source? So this is very important. And why it's important is because if you self-source, you have total control on where you want to go to, which organization you want to step into, who you want to work under, who's going to be your mentor. You even have the flexibility of being either directly employed by this organization or even going through a scholarship. And if you are directly employed, obviously you're going to make more money than that scholarship. So total control if you can do this. And if you're an undergraduate, you have the arsenal to do this. You have all the resources and skills to basically take this on and really excel. But that's a little bit from me. I'm going to pass you on to Eddie, who will obviously speak about this further.
Yeah, so self-sourcing is really an art form. Sometimes you can get a little bit lucky, but it's mostly an art form in terms of convincing people that you're worth investing into. Noor's highlighted why it's important, given the current situation with COVID-19. We work frantically around the clock to get positions, but there's something to be said about people who attempt to do this, right? We don't expect everyone to self-source their own position, right? That's very unlikely to happen. But what really, and I have to say, pisses me off is when people just take things for granted, right? And when you take things for granted, one moment they're not there, you really fall into trouble. So the best way to circumnavigate any problems that are going to occur is to preemptively strike. And in this case, the preemptive strike is self-sourcing. Know the industry that you're going into. Know the companies that employ people. Know the engineers in the industry. If you go back a couple of years, for those of you that have had me and teach you for a couple of years, and some of you that have had a chance to interact with me, I'm a firm believer that you are your own master of your future, right? You create the industry that you're going into. You create the path that you're going to go into, and everything else around you is just some guiding principles, some hints and tips, but you do the actual work. So yes, we have university sourced places. We have lots of them, but they may not be the ones that you want. So if you want something and you want to compete for it with less people, you go and carve your own piece of the pie. Don't wait for the pie to be put on the table and say, okay, guys, here's the cake. Everyone's going to get a slice of it, right? There's not enough cake for everyone, and someone takes a bigger slice than others. And that means that you might be left without a position, but more importantly, you'll be left with a position that may not be what you're looking for. So why wait for that? Right? Why wait for us to give you and say, here's a position? At least make an effort. That's the least that you can do, and make a proper effort, because some of you say, oh, I made an effort. And then when I dig a little bit deeper, I see that your effort was you sent 2 emails that were poorly written without clearly stating what you're looking for and how and blah, 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 and everything else that comes with it. And you say, I made an effort. That is not good enough, right? If that's the effort that you put in to getting yourself a placement, that's probably a reflection of what sort of effort you're going to put in on the job. And that's how the company's thinking about it. If I'm on the other end, and by the way, I have a company, I have multiple companies, and we also employ people. I know exactly what I'm looking for. And I'm not looking for someone who writes a shitty email, who can't structure sentences, has grammar issues all over the place, spelling errors, etc., etc. But most of all, is not very coherent with what they're looking for. And that's an email. 3 ways you can engage with companies very, very simply from your desktop. The easiest one is your email. The likelihood of succeeding via email, very low, because we get hundreds and hundreds of emails on a daily basis. Just like I do in academia, companies do in industry. Second thing is making a phone call. Okay, many companies are no longer in their offices, so this might be a bit of an issue during COVID-19, but many of them are diverting calls anyway, so you can give that a go. The third one and most successful way to get placements is the physical approach. That makes it more difficult now because you can't physically go to the company. However, we have stage 4 lockdown for another 3 weeks. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it doesn't last for much longer than that. But if it does, well, we'll deal with that as it comes. The advantage of all of this is that everyone's online. And because everyone's online, as Noor mentioned, it's much more likely that they will see you online if you're active online, if you make yourself visible. No one is going to notice you just because you have good grades, right? Except for your mom and dad and maybe one academic. But it's not your mom and dad that are employing you in most cases. We've had family-owned businesses before, but 99% of the companies that you're going into are not owned by your parents. So it's not them that you have to impress. It's not the academics that you have to impress. It's the companies that you have to impress. It's the employees that you have to impress. So if you go back a couple of years now, when I was bringing industry lectures to class, I wanted to see how you guys behave in those situations. Most of you listen to the lecture. Oh yeah, it's nice. I learned something. Walk straight out. A few of you made the effort to go up to the lecturer, the industry lecturer, shake their hand and say, hey, my name's Steve. My name's Lauren. My name's so-and-so. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed that. I want to stay in touch. Connected on LinkedIn. You started to grow your network. You now have, yes, a very little reputation industry, but you have a reputation industry. Some of you are absolutely not visible. No one knows about you except for your mum and dad and a few of your friends. And that is a bad thing. That means that you are going to be much harder to sell than the other students. That's the reason we keep saying, go to networking events, go to industry lectures, whether it's online, face-to-face, whatever the case might be. Consume content outside of the classroom. Do things that others are not doing, because that's what makes you stand out. Everyone else, you're in a sausage factory. That's the reality of it, right? The sausage factory is going to produce sausages. If you're vegetarian, I'm sorry, it could be a vegetarian patty, but it's the same ingredients, the same process, the same outcome. If you want to be something different, you have to go and do something different. The opportunities are there. So my advice to you right now is that start looking for the companies that you want to work in. And you're much more likely going to have success if you're looking for small, medium enterprises as if you're looking for large corporate organizations, because large corporate organizations have predefined programs. You can get into those programs. You can convert those programs into a work integrated learning placement, but it's much harder. You're competing with a huge selection of students from all over the country. Small, medium enterprises, right? Let's say up to 50 or 60 employees, don't always have structured programs, which means that they take students based on recommendations, based on the network. It's not a coincidence that I keep saying your network is your net worth, because the people around you are the people that are likely going to recognize you and say, hey, you have something to offer, you have value to offer. Why do people employ you? It's a value exchange. You give me something, I give you something. If you have nothing to give except, hey, I'm a human being, well, guess what? There are 7 billion human beings on this planet. What makes you different? Well, if we just focus on Melbourne, there are 200,000 international students here. What makes you different? There are 20,000 engineering students. What makes you different? What makes you stand out? Your personality, right? The traits that you have. And people need to know about that if they're worthwhile mentioning. So sell yourself to companies, build your network. It's not too late to do that now, right? It's not too late to do that now, but you have to get a move on. And since you're spending most of your time at home, there's nothing stopping you from finishing your normal classes, a couple of things, and then focusing on building your LinkedIn profile, making sure your CV is really up to date, growing your network, looking for the companies, understanding what the companies are looking for. Specifically, what type of engineers do they employ? And then how do my skills, and it's not always about the technical skills, by the way, guys. In fact, most of the time, it's not about the technical skills. It's about what you can offer the company. Do you fit the company culture? Do you actually understand what company culture is? First of all, that's something that you need to look into. What are the key selection criteria for that organization? How will you get in touch with them? You don't always aim for the most senior person in the company, because the most senior person in the company is probably the most busy person in the company, the most responsibilities. Aim for people that are slightly older than you, that have recently entered the company, to find out, hey, what is the company looking for? And a good source of people is previous work integrated learning students, alumni, right? We can consider these like our brothers and sisters. They're Latrobians. So if anyone's going to give you a little bit of inside information, it's going to be them. You have that connection. Hey, you know, I'm an undergraduate student. Make sure that what you're writing comes across as genuine. Dear Mark, my name is Steve. I'm a current undergraduate student engineering at Trobe University, looking to get placed into companies. Saw the company that you're working in, very much interested in hearing more about it. I'd be very, very thankful if you could give me 15 to 20 minutes of your time. I can't buy you a coffee right now, But when COVID-19 is over, more than happy to, buy you a coffee and have a chat. Would really appreciate some of your time and providing me with some hints and tips on how I can get into that company. Very simple. Not everyone will respond to that, but you're much more likely to get good responses to that than if you just add someone on LinkedIn with absolutely no intention of communicating with them just because you want to see what they're doing. Build those skills up, and I guarantee you, you will have a much, much higher chance of securing your own placement. Nora and I can step in and help you with some details, but you're going to have to do the fishing. We can help you pull the fish out of the water, but we're not going to be casting the rod for you. We're not going to be telling you everything to do and what bait to use and so on. Part of that is on you. Go and do it. The resources are there available to you, but we can't help you reel the fish in. That means if there's a bite, if there's an interest on the company's behalf and you need a little bit of guidance, we will help you with that. I know Lauren's on this call here. I was just wondering if we could maybe give Lauren a chance to speak. Lauren, I hope I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'm going to give you the microphone. So maybe you can just say a few words about the approach that you used, some advice that you received, and how things have gone on for you, because you are someone that's reached out and made the effort. So I'm just going to give you the microphone. Lauren, I hope that you can say a few words on that. How you going, Lauren?
Good, thank you. Yeah, I reached out to Eddie and I just asked, I would like to self-source. Is there anything that I can do to increase my chances? And he suggested that I post it on LinkedIn. And I got LinkedIn when we started doing ITI in second year. So I have been building my contacts and my network on there for a couple years now. So I took some professional photos at home during quarantine. It's pretty simple to do. I put on a shirt and then I made a post just highlighting some of my key things that would help me get employed, I guess. And I posted it and then a recruiter commented. So I continued to network with them and they handed me off to the right recruiter in Melbourne. And then I had a couple phone calls and they passed everything on to the managers. So worked out really well.
Very good. So thanks very much, Lauren. Appreciate that input. And guys, there's no right formula for this, right? So what worked for Lauren may not work for you. Posting on LinkedIn like that means that you still have to have some formal network in order for people to notice it. And it has to be noticeable, right? And there's many different things that get noticed on social media, right? Sometimes good, sometimes bad. But there's not one approach to do this. You just got to grow your network and you have to go and start researching the companies and who's doing what. And in second year, most of the time in one of the subjects, I ask people to list on one piece of paper the companies that they know that they could get employed in. And very few people can list more than 5 companies without using the internet. I think maybe 1 or 2, right? And you're probably in this cohort. But if you get asked a question about your favorite sport, your favorite band, your favorite whatever, you can list hundreds because that's what you do on a daily basis. Well, what I'm asking you to do now is put that aside for a second. Yes, I love football as well. I love sports as well. I love music as well. But music and sports is not paying my salary, right? My favorite football player is not going to say, Eddie, let me place you into this company here. Only I will do that. And only I can do that. Which means that I have to know where I'm going in order to position myself to get that position. And that's what you got to start doing now if you haven't done that already. Sometimes I say this and some people take real action, like Lauren and a few others, Mika Joe as well, and others. But others just goes in one ear and goes out the other. 3 months down the track, oh, Eddie, can you help me? I cannot help you if you've gone past and done nothing. Start today. Make the effort today. We will provide advice. We'll run a separate session on how to self-source again, provide more input, but you got to make the effort to start with. Otherwise, it's going to be too late. And then you're going to be in trouble. Then you're going to panic. Then you're going to create pressure on us when really it was your fault. Okay. I'm not going to go into too much more detail. We can run a little workshop on self-sourcing and get other people involved, but it's really up to you.
The last comment I will just make is that the worst thing is for us is for you to, like Eddie said, attend these sessions, think you're bigger than the world, you're some sort of big shot, and you're a bit cocky. I've spoken to those type of students before. Then they start to freak out. Nothing really eventuates, and nothing really happens. And then they graduate and they send us an email saying, hey, can you guys please help us? And it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. We're here to help you guys now because you guys are enrolled students. But whatever we say, there is an expectation for whatever we say is for you guys to basically take it on in a manner where you tailor it to your needs, you tailor it to some of the skills you may not have, and then basically leverage those skills to get a position or to help yourself get a position. So yeah, just a heads up on that. I'll go through this in a little bit of detail also. So university source placements, as I said, the Will team will assist in arranging your interviews. You may have one more, you may have more than one interview. So as I said, pre-COVID, 2 to 3. Now with COVID, we're aiming for a minimum of 1, but we just don't know what could possibly happen. And that's why we're also emphasizing the self-source and basically capitalizing on this work from home for all people that are working in industry. So you can get a self-source position. If you choose not to take the opportunity presented to you, we are not obligated to secure you an alternative placement. That I can't stress also. I've had some students who, we've given placements to, they finished the interview and for whatever reason, they've been accepted and they give me a call and they say, oh, can you find me another company? I don't want this company. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for us because I'm going to have to say to this organization, hey, the student doesn't want to work for you. And this organization is going to say to me, well, why didn't you tell me before? Because I could have interviewed somebody that did want to work for me. So if you do that, and I'm telling you, it won't end well. And it won't end well because you've obviously not been transparent from the beginning. And as I said, be transparent as possible, but also, and I can't stress this enough, and Eddie will know this too. If you're thinking that if you're a civil engineer, you're going to work on the Burj Khalifa in the first 6 months of placement, you're dreaming. You've got another thing coming for you. If you think you're going to be some hotshot working on this and that, you've got another thing coming from you. I think a lot of students need a reality check. A lot of students also need to know that to work on the Burj Khalifa, you have to eat a lot of shit before you can work on that. And a lot of students don't understand that also. So the reality check is when you're given an opportunity, especially when you're not even an engineer, you're still a student, you take it on board and you learn from the experience. And you learn so much from the experience that it helps you excel into your next job, into your next position. Do you want to go into the private sector? Do you want to go into the public sector? Do you want to work at your local council? Or do you want to work in a design and consulting team? Do you want to work in geotech? That's if you're civil engineering. If you're an industrial engineering student, do you want to be your average project manager? Or do you want to go in and do programming and work on embedded electronics? Is that something you want to do? These are question marks that I think a lot of students just don't understand or don't really have an idea of. So yes, no, you're definitely not building the Burj Khalifa if you do a work integrated learning. It'll start off slow because you know nothing. And that's the honest truth. And what happens is slowly, you'll be given more responsibilities. And then after that 3-month mark, you will grow exponentially. That's what we've seen. And Eddie can comment on this too. You will understand the systems, you'll understand the processes that organization has, and you will learn from all of that. And then that's when you start providing back to the organization. In the first 3 months, you're actually at a loss. You're not really an asset. You're actually a huge liability for the organization. They're investing into you. So on top of the $10,000 scholarship they've already given to you, they're also investing their time into you because the hour they charge as a consulting rate is about $200. Now they're putting that back into you and you're going to say, oh, well, this is a bit boring. Well, tough luck. This is the job. You've got to learn. And then, I know the millennials and whatever it is now, Gen Zs or whatever the generation is, you like to run before you know how to walk. And you think you're going to be a CEO by 25, 26 years old. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. It's not how the world works. Obviously, Mark Zuckerberg and all those guys have defied odds. But If you're a Harvard University graduate, then that's a whole different story.
No, can you just go back to that point here about the investment in students? Okay, so that you guys know, most of you know what a market looks like, right? And if you remember, some markets have those old school scales, right? Where on one side they put some fruit and vegetables, and on the other side they put some weights. Those days are long gone now because we have digital scales and so on, right? But what I want you guys to look at, Will, here is what are you getting and what are you giving? You should always keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind, because once you're in the company, what you're getting versus what you're giving, especially in the first few months, far outweighs, right? What you're getting far outweighs what you're giving. Please keep that in mind. It doesn't matter how much work you're doing, hours don't equate to value. This is something that you need to learn. Time put in does not equate value. This is something that I battle with at Trobe University as well. There are certain people at Trobe University who think just because they put hours in, they're creating value. Sometimes you create less value and create more problems. I'm not saying that you're going to do that, but you need to keep in mind that hours don't equal value. What creates value? When you're solving something that can be monetized. Because rest assured, companies are about making money. Never mind what they tell you on their mission, vision, care about the environment, we're supporting, females in engineering. Fantastic. This is part of their company structure, yes. But if they're not making money, they're not supporting females in engineering. They're not supporting the environment. They're not supporting anything because they can't actually do that. So if you're making money for the company, you're creating value for the company. If you're working in a consultancy, consultancies bill hours. 1 hour of consulting, junior consultant, $200. I know this because I have consultants in my company. Senior consultants, $500 an hour. And you might be thinking to yourself, who the hell pays $500 for an hour of consulting? Well, in that 1 hour, you saved that company $10,000 because you provided them with crucial advice, input. So there's plenty of value there. You'll learn that later on in your career. But the reason I want to keep emphasizing this to you is that in the first 3 months, you need to learn how to add value to the company. And are you really adding value? So from our experience, Nora and I, we go out to all the companies. We will visit you 2 times on placement while you're there. And we look at what you're doing and we look at what the company is doing. Most of the companies we know now really, really well. It takes about 2 to 3 months before you hit into second gear and you start generating some genuine value for that company, which they monetize. After 6 months, you are an asset to the company, provided that you did a good job. The company does not want to let you go because they've just invested into you. And there's a thing called return on investment. At which point do they get back what they put into you? Every day, you will have meetings with a supervisor on site. Sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it can be half a day, depending on what you're doing. If that person is investing 1 hour into you, that 1 hour is costing the company, right, $200 because that's what they're charging out. So they are losing $200 by not having that person doing consulting. So you're costing the company $200. That's just the hour of the person that's coaching you, teaching you on the job. Where are the other resources in the company that are being invested? So I don't want to do any basic math here for you, but I will just say tens of thousands of dollars of training time are invested into you in the first few months. But you're getting a $10,000 scholarship on the other end. You say, oh, well, this is not a lot of money. That money is not there to pay you. That money there is just to help you bear some of the costs, living expenses. The real money will be made later on when you stand out in the industry. So never forget that. You are there to learn, not to earn money. If you want to earn money, you can drive Ubers and work at petrol stations and do whatever else, but that's not going to set you up for a big career. It's a competitive field. There are lots of fish swimming, and you want to be that fish that gets there first. And that's what we're setting you up to do. Never forget the scales, what you're getting, what you're giving. And until you become a fully fledged engineer, you're getting a lot more than you're giving, regardless of how many hours you're putting in, whether you're working overtime or not. Never forget that.
Okay. So cutoff dates in regards to self-source placements. So all of you will indicate whether you guys are going to have you guys will either be self-sourcing or university sourcing on your EOI. The dates, the cutoff dates will all be reflected by tomorrow. We'll give you about 2 weeks to fill out everything. So don't stress. 2 weeks is an ample amount of time to get yourself prepared to fill out the EOI. These EOIs take 15 minutes. So please get everything prepared, your resume, and anything else you think that might help your application. So please do that. In the previous slide, there was something about career services. So career services is another business unit within the university that basically prepares or helps you prepare for interviews. It helps you also with your CVs so somebody will check it, spelling mistakes or even any recommendations. So please utilize that service. They're very good. We work with them very closely also. But they've got their own website, as in their own links, so you can easily arrange an appointment with a career counselor to help you out. And as I said, please utilize it. Some of you might not need it because I know EEP and ITI really prepares you for work integrated learning, and that's why Eddie was pivotal in this program, WIL program, just because he those two subjects are based on what industry wants. So if you've completed them, if you've also excelled in them, this should be a walk in the park, to be 110% honest with you. And I can already see some of you guys that have really excelled. So payments, we've already spoken about. So the $10,000 scholarship, a university source, self-source, obviously, you have an option of going through the university university facilitated scholarship or to be paid directly. In regards to all of that, we'll be in contact with the self-source students. We'll get you guys to fill out some paperwork, and if for whatever reason you've proposed to your organization that, hey, they would want to pay you a $10,000 scholarship, then we'll discuss that further on. And Steve, Mary, myself will be in contact with you guys in regards to that. There's something there also, and this is new. This is basically, this all depends on COVID-19. Some placements may be unpaid. Now, this is an extreme case. This is a worst case scenario. We're hoping we never hit that. We've never have until basically COVID-19 happened. This is just from a business standpoint. When businesses who don't generate enough money, revenues decrease. The effect is that some of these companies can't afford to have some of their people or employees in their team. Naturally, they have to get rid of some of their employees. So, can they afford to bring on a student, pay them a scholarship, and then train them for the next 6 months when they're going through a pandemic? Well, I'm not going to answer that. Just use your logic. And if you've said yes, you're not ready for the work integrated learning program. Let me tell you. So yeah, I can't stress that enough. As I said, I'm not going to speak about that a lot. There's some placements may be unpaid. I don't want to speak about it, but if we do need to speak about it, depending on what happens with these restrictions, we will have another Zoom chat. What happens is every time you guys finish a specific step in this process, we will get in contact with you guys via Zoom. We've done this with all our cohorts. And it's basically the easiest way to keep in contact with you guys, just to give you guys a heads up on where we are in the program.
No, I just might say that it's, rather than using the word unpaid, I would say unscholarshiped. So without scholarship, right?
That's correct.
The company may not be able to afford a scholarship in that particular place.
That's correct. All right, next slide, please.
Just very quickly as well, Nor, you did mention it. That link there, the self-source placement form, is a new but really useful and important tool that we will ask for you to complete it to a really high level. So if you are talking to a company and you've got something that you think is lined up that is promising, that form and that link will take you to a place where you can tell us everything about it, what the project is, who the company is, who's supervising you, if you've discussed with them that question of scholarships and those sorts of things. And we use that form to decide if it's an appropriate placement, to complete the paperwork, etc. So it's a really important step as well in that self-source process. And I think we've said we're going to give until the end of September for that. There'll be more on that in the next couple of slides.
So yeah, self-sourcing, as I've said, I would prefer that first all of you guys do the EOI, and then you guys will be sent an email with that self-sourced link. And I do this just because I need to know if you're eligible to partake in the WIL program. The last thing you want to do is go have a self-source or to commit to a self-source placement and then not be eligible for work integrated learning. That puts you obviously in a sticky situation. So complete the EOI first. You will receive an email saying, yes, you are eligible. You have moved on to the second round. And for whatever reason, no, you're not eligible. And it could be because of this reason, that reason, or another reason. So I will detail that in an email to all of you.
Yeah, I've just skipped ahead now a couple of slides to that one, which is what you've just covered. So yeah, that is the next step. The EOI is coming up now.
That's correct. So EOI and big interview. EOI this will all turn on tomorrow. There's still some work to do on my end for it. And basically we're giving you guys till even a little bit better instead of 2 September to complete this. But obviously the earlier you guys get this in, the better it is for you. Just something that's out of the way for you guys. So that is a very, very important aspect, the EOI, and also something else that we've added is the big interview. Have we taken a screenshot of the big interview, Steve, by any chance on the slide?
No, there isn't one here in this slideshow.
Okay, I might just share my screen. So give me 2 seconds, guys. Two seconds.
Nor while you're doing that, I might just quickly show this next slide because we've touched on it, but it's basically timelines. Very useful to get your head around this, and we'll send the slides out after this chat. But as you can see, we're in August right now, and we're doing the information sessions. September is there to be a month in which we are dealing with industry to recruit positions. As Noor just said, and he'll show you more in a moment, there's 2 things you'll be doing. You'll be doing the big interview and your expression of interest through September. So September is quite an important month. October, we will continue to recruit partners and positions. You might be doing some self-sourcing. Basically, October, September is a lot of prep work. And by November, once we get to that point, we're expecting to be having student interviews happening, placement paperwork beginning, same in December for a January start. So we've used broad dates and broad timelines there to give you a picture of how it would work, but you can see that there's a lot going on in September. So make sure you study this once we send the slides out. I'll pass it back to Noor if you were going to do a bit of a chat about the big interview, Noor.
Yep. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. And this is important, and I hope none of you get confused. It's very, very simple. There it is. So my expectation is once obviously all these dates are updated, what you'll do is basically you will follow some instructions on the big interview, and then you will submit your link. And the big interview is just 4 simple questions that you guys have to answer. And what that helps us do, it basically helps us rank you guys. Now, we haven't spoken about ranking, but yes, we do rank, and me and Eddie will go into further detail about that. There are a lot of questions also I see in the Q&A. So maybe if you guys want to hold them a little bit later for later on after we finish this, because there will be an option for you guys to speak up. So we'll answer most of your questions. But yes, so big interview, very important. So you complete your expression of interest, and then you submit your big interview link, which basically gives us access to you answering the 4 questions. And then from there, you've got examples, also your unofficial academic transcript. As I said, this is basically an honesty test. It makes me do extra work to find your academic transcripts, but I expect all of you guys to do this. It's very simple. You go into your student online, you go to your results tab, and you say, please send me unofficial academic transcript. You upload it, and it gives us just a good sense of how many credit points you've completed. But also, if you failed subjects, as I said, don't think we're going to say anything or we're going to treat you any differently. As I said, I don't give a shit if you failed subjects. Just put it in there, be honest, and it just helps us know where you are at too. There was a question in regards to, can I do vector calculus next next year in parallel to work integrated learning? The answer from me is no. I don't think you can, but I've just said in the email, case by case basis, please speak to your course coordinator, Eddie, because I am not the, unfortunately, the course coordinator, so I do not make these calls, but I know from experience that doing vector calculus and work integrated learning just don't go hand in hand. And Eddie's unmuted himself, so he can talk about that a little further.
Absolutely not. And this is not saying that you can't actually balance the workloads, but you're going to set yourself up to fail. And when I mean fail, I don't necessarily mean failing the whole experience, but failing to deliver the best possible outcomes for the company, right? We need to make sure that we optimize the opportunities that you have so you create success for yourself and the company. And if you're balancing, right, vector calculus, regardless of whether you've gone through it once and you think you can do it and pass it or not, it's one of the tricky ones, especially vector calculus, right? Engineers generally hate maths, even though we use mathematics, but it's a tricky one. So that's not one subject that I would definitely try to balance with work integrated learning, especially because you have so many academic assessments with work integrated learning. Believe me, after you do an 8 to 5 shift in a company, whatever you're doing, and then you have to come home and do various other things and do some academic work, you're not going to be in the mood to do vector calculus and do work integrated learning assessments. This is from past experiences. It's a big workload, right? Don't underestimate it at all. So my advice is do not do that. But if your academic supervisor, your course coordinator approves it, then I just wash my hands of your failure. Because if you fail, and if you say, oh, but the workload was big, I won't even entertain your conversation. That will be something that your course coordinator will have to entertain on you. So that's against my advice. My other advice is, if you prefer, apply for work integrated learning now and look at completing vector calculus next year sometime, or completing it at another institution, getting cross university credit, or doing some sort of summer version or whatever, but do not do them in parallel, especially vector calculus of all subjects, right? That's my advice, but you can do whatever you like.
So we've had in that second case where a student has completed work integrated learning, and the issue is they've done all their subjects and their last subject is vector calculus. It's probably one of the most demotivating situations to be in, but look, it's happened. So what the students basically done, they've worked part-time because they've gone on to receive a position within that organization they've done their placement at, and then they basically spend a day at university or 2 days at university working on vector calculus. So it is possible, but just to stress once again that if your course coordinator approves you overloading, which is going to be very difficult, there is no such thing as going for a remission of debt or anything like that, because we've been explicit with the work that there is to do. So it's not, as I said, Will is not a walk in the park. In my opinion, it's actually a lot harder than doing a project or a thesis or a capstone project, because you're there 9 to 5 and then you're coming back home and working on assessment pieces. When you're working on capstone or anything like that, you're, you've got a lot of flexibility to basically do whatever you want, be wherever you want, but just completing the assessment tasks. All right, Steve, so next slide.
Well, I think we're nearly at the end of the actual slides. I'll just see what's next. We did skip one more about, I think we might be out of time, but possibly we can come back to this in the future. Do you think that's okay?
This is I'll put this as a slide on LMS, but this is where I find actually I don't want to go through this, and I want you guys to do the research. I want you guys to do the research to understand what roles are there currently as a graduate engineer, and what do they do in each field. So if you're doing civil engineering and you're working at a local council, what are you doing? And it's really simple. You just go into Seek, or you find the position descriptions, and you just look at position descriptions. If you're going to work for a Downer or a Fulton Hogan, what are you doing? Look at the position description and have an idea, and let that idea build inside of your head of where you think you might want to go. Now, there's another question in regards to in the Q&A. Can I select the company to go with? The simple answer is no. You have an area of interest that we will try to align the organization with, but there are no guarantees. It just depends on on how many students we can basically match with companies. That's why we're stressing, if for whatever reason after your research you are scared that you might not be matched with a company you have in mind, self-source. It's that easy. Self-source. Go out there and find a company that aligns with what you want or where your career wants to go. Don't rely on us, self-source. And I can't stress that enough.
Cool. So Nora's touched on this one quickly. There are some really strong career support options at La Trobe. So in addition to the great advice that this group and Nora will give you, you can always reach out further to these sort of support services. And when we send the slides out, you'll see the links to them for you to check out. But basically that brings us to a bit of a chance now to have a conversation, ask questions. You can pop your questions into the Q&A as you've been doing, and we'll just use this time to help answer them.
Let's start from the top. There's a few questions already. I know Nora's answered a few already, but I'm not sure whether attendees can actually see the answered questions. Can someone confirm in the chat that you can actually see the answered questions and Nora's answers? Okay, great. Okay, so we won't go through all of them. Some of them are worth mentioning out loud, and some of them we can answer word by word. So one question here is, do we get a mark for each assessment, or do we simply get a final grade for the subject? You get a mark for every assessment piece, right? So you have 3 assessments in WLA and 3 assessments in WLB. In each one of those assessments, there's a specified percentage, which means that is worth that much of that particular subject. So for example, WLB, 65% assessment is related to the thesis. So that means if you get 100% in that particular assessment, that means you're getting 65% of the overall grade for WLB, which is worth 30 credit points, right? 30. And that's how it works. So each assessment is independent of each other, but you do have to accumulate over 50% in order to pass. There are no hurdles. You can fail the thesis and in theory still pass the subject. It's much, much harder, but it's possible, right? There's no hurdles whatsoever. It makes life a whole lot easier.
All right, so yeah, basically any more questions, please feel free to ask. You've got us here, ask away.
Right.
And yeah, we'll be more than happy to answer.
Faisal said, as you have said, that I cannot apply because I'm not in my second semester. Does that mean? Yes, okay, so Faisal, the question is, you're in second semester of your first year of your master's. Yes, you can apply, but you should not be applying now. You should be applying next semester, right? You apply in your penultimate semester. So in your second last semester, you are applying to do will in your last semester. That's for postgraduates. For undergraduates, you apply in your penultimate year, right? So you apply in third year to do your work integrated learning placement in the first semester or first half of the year in the following year. Okay, but it's good that you're here for this information session because you're learning ahead what you need to do and when you need to do it. And it's probably worthwhile coming to another info session so you can really drill deep and get those answers. What will be the WAM cutoff to be eligible for will? Okay, let me explain this. There's no such thing as a WAM cutoff. There is a thing that we use to rank people. So we don't just rank you based on WAM, right? Although WAM is a good indicator that you are committed to getting, say, plain and simply shit done, right? If you have a good WAM, it does not mean that you're the smartest person in the world. We've had people with very high WAMs who were absolutely useless in industry because they thought they were the world's gift to engineering when they weren't. But it does show dedication. It shows that you're committed. It shows that you can do things, right? The actual interview that you do, the big interview, gives us a lot more information about who you are, how you respond, body language, eye contact, all of those other bits and pieces. And the likelihood of me not knowing who you are or Nor not knowing who you are is very, very low. So if you've had interactions with me, I sort of know already what your capacity is, whether you go to the top of the list or bottom of the list based on your commitment. For all those times that I used to say, guys, come to these events, attend these networking events, connect, follow up. I know who you are. I know what you do. Your WAM is part of it, but it's not the only thing. There are other things we look for. Extracurricular activities. Are you involved in things outside of the classroom, or are you the sort of person that just goes to class, passes exams, and goes out? It says a lot about you as an individual. So those things are going to play a big role in where you rank on that list. And so ranking on that list means preferences, who gets what and where. That's how we work it through. Okay, so hopefully that explains. There's no such thing as a cutoff wham, but it does play a part in ranking you internally. In the final semester, we have one subject to go. How can we manage to get through that if we get a placement? Son Fam, I assume, are you an undergraduate student or postgraduate student? This is the question. Please just type that in, we'll come back to it. When is the deadline for choice between self-sourced and university-placed position? Noor, do you want to answer that one?
So that one will basically depend. We're not going to be too strict. It's basically COVID. So what happens with COVID? So we've got EOIs closing up in September. So I'm just looking at my timelines. So we will give you guys basically to the end of October for self-sourcing. So by end of October, you guys will fill in a form or an online Qualtrics form and put into there which company you've self-sourced with. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So basically end of October, again, depending on COVID, we're being very, very flexible here because we can't foresee what will happen. And we will work with you guys in regards to that. So there is no such thing as, you know, it's a hard lock or that's the deadline. We will be flexible, but there's also a level of flexibility we can have where we have to make it fair and equitable for all students. So, you know, we will help you, I guess, try to get be in the best place possible going into 2021, considering the circumstances we're in. We have another question also. This is from our...
Can I just come back to Son Pham, because he did put the additional question in there. So he's a master's student. So if you have one subject to go, you may have to do this subject as a summer version, right? You're a postgraduate student. We have term subjects now available. So Son, you have to speak to your course coordinator and you have to get this enabled by the course coordinator to complete that subject. You're a little bit lucky because we have these term subjects, like term 4, term 5, term 6, term 1. They're an alternative. So you might be able to do it that way, but I can't answer that question. You have to speak to your course coordinator. Please go and see them as soon as possible. Go on, Noel.
Could I also quickly throw something in on that topic of self-sourced and uni-sourced?
Yeah.
Just really quickly, one of the things we will want to make sure doesn't happen is if we allocate you to a company and to an interview, and then they offer you something, we don't want you to then come back and say, actually, I've sourced something myself. So these next 2 months, feel free to be looking and sourcing something for yourself as a backup. Like Eddie said, being proactive, getting on the front foot. If it does get to the point when we are allocating you to a placement, by then it's too late. So basically, you know, think of it as in phases, and this next phase is really your chance to get ahead of the game, at least until, like Noor said, roughly the end of October. Once we get past that date, it starts to be more that if you haven't self-sourced something by then, we will assume you're in the university sourced group in most cases.
No, you're not. Okay, well, I'll go through the questions now. Currently in the last semester of civil engineering student, may I know when will WLB, okay, I need to explain this. There is no such thing as a WLB process. There is only a will process, right? Work integrated learning is made up of WLA, WLB. You cannot complete WLB as a separate thing, and you cannot complete WLA as a separate thing. They come together. The only difference is that if you do not perform in the first phase, you won't go on to WLB. But you can't do one without the other. They are like brother and sister here. They come in a package, okay? You have to do both of them, and both of them give you the 60 credit points and the graduate outcomes that are required, okay? So there's no such thing as a WLB process. There are WLB assessment pieces, but if you don't get into will as a program, you don't do either of them.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to, answer that question there. Yes, there is no such thing as, you know, you go through the whole process again for WLB, basically you start the EOI 6 months prior to us going for placements, and you are now in a list of students that are eligible for work integrated learning, and then that's it. But there is no, yes, we have to do EOIs again for WLB. I think that student that asked that question was maybe in the previous cohort, or didn't put the EOI in, or whatever. But if you are that student, just give me a call and I'll discuss where we're at. If you are, a student that's on this chat that's from the postgraduate engineering you guys will all be receiving an email by close of business today to give you guys an update of where we're at and basically what we're going to do. So that will be there by the close of business today. So just a heads up if you are in that cohort.
Next question.
If I'm an international student, can I do wheel back home? All right. Now this one is a bit of a tricky question, so I'm going to pass it to Eddie.
Yeah, I can answer that. So yes and no. Let me explain what I mean by yes and no. Students can undertake international work integrated learning placements for sure. This is the question to you. Are you looking, I'm assuming, I can't assume actually, I won't be wrong, but whichever country you're from or saying back home, it could be the Middle East, maybe Pakistan, whatever it is. The question is, do you want to get a job in Australia after you graduate, or do you want to get a job back home? So Ahmed, can you please just answer that question for me? Just type it in the chat. You want to get a job in Australia, or do you want to get a job back home, wherever that is? Hopefully Ahmed will answer that question, if he's still listening. I want to get a job. Okay, back in Saudi Arabia. Okay, good answer. Thank you, Ahmed. Yes, okay, this is a good example. So if your plan is to work back home, in this case, Saudi Arabia, then it makes perfect sense for you, if you want to, of course, to get a work integrated learning placement in Saudi Arabia. No problems at all. There are some additional pieces of information that Nora and I will need to have. So how do we get in touch with your supervisors over there? Does your supervisor speak English or only Arabic? Because we need to be able to communicate to your supervisor, right? There are a lot of bits and pieces that we need to take care of. But in theory, yes, we need to deal with this specially with you. So you'll have to let us know the details. We can take this offline and discuss it and deal with it later on. Okay, I won't say too much now. We can deal with it later on. Thanks, Ahmed.
Case by case there, Ahmed. So that will be just a one-on-one where you will send us an email and then we'll follow up.
And the reason I kept asking where you plan to work, because if you're planning to work in Australia, my advice is don't get international work experience unless it's from countries like the US, Germany, or continental Europe, maybe Japan, a few countries that are really recognized for their engineering excellence, because companies in Australia won't recognize that work experience as valuable because they have no oversight of what you did and how you did it, right? So my advice is do it in Australia. It's much more likely going to give you a chance to get a job here, but it's not always the case, okay? Let's go on to the next question. Can you apply for the university sourced part as well as the self-sourced in case you can't find the placement? Yes, you can and you should. Everyone from today should start looking for their own placements, right? But that does not exclude you from the university placed ones. But at some point, we have to draw the line because we do not want to say, okay, Mr. X, here is a placement with company Y. And then you say 2 weeks later, oh, but I found my own placement. Because you got to remember that leaves us in a very bad position. We have to manage the companies. And if you decide to find your own placement while we've already lined the placement up for you, that's going to be a very bad result. It's happened a few times before. So we're going to draw a line at certain points. Because of COVID-19, we're going to be flexible, but we're not going to tolerate last minute changes because it makes us look terrible. And those companies won't come back next year. They'll say, you know what, Trobe University, that was very unprofessional from you. So hopefully that answers that question. Nor you can take the next one.
Yeah, no, just more on that. So what will happen is before we start to match students, I will send an email once again with that self-source form to all of you that have obviously made it onto the next stage of work integrated learning. And then you guys will fill that out and then we'll confirm that you guys are self-sourced and then we'll start the matching process. But if for whatever reason, after the matching process is done and you have been advised of an interview time, and then you go to the interview, then you have a self-source position, that's going to put us into a sticky situation. And I just don't want to be in that situation, to be 110% honest with you guys. So please be aware. Please think about these things, and just don't be selfish. I think that's the best thing right there. You've got ample time to go now and hunt down a placement, so take advantage of it. But don't. What basically you do is, if we have a student for whatever reason that really needs this position, you've just taken their spot by putting your hands, by double dipping. So be honest with us and tell us, yep, I'm just going to self-source, or look, guys, I've failed miserably. No, sorry, I don't want to use that terminology, not failed. I couldn't find a self-source placement for whatever reason, and I need to go through the university source placement path. So that's fine. All right, more questions. So Kunal Ramani, hello, thank you for your time and guidance. Thank you, Kunal. By the end of the semester, I'll complete 330 credit points. If I get discuss, and if I get the approval, course coordinator, can I apply for will? So this one's for Eddie. 330 is obviously 30 credit points under 360. Obviously, depending, this is more an academic question, but from my experience, depending on the study plan you create with your course coordinator, depending on how, visa requirements, I don't know if you're an international or a local student. So these are all things you need to have a conversation with your course coordinator with. So the course coordinator will give you approval in regards to all of that. We'll basically give the tick, yes, you can do will, or no, you cannot. It's all up for discussion with your course coordinator. We and Eddie can just speculate, or I myself can only speculate. Eddie's obviously an academic, so he can give you some more information, but the final approval comes from them.
Yeah, there's an academic progression plan that you guys have if you fail a few subjects. So your course coordinator is responsible for basically charting the course forward from that point. So he tells you, okay, in this semester you're doing this, in this semester you're doing that. And if you failed here, you have to do it over here, right? So there's that plan. And you need to sit down with your academic coordinator, and they need to be the ones that approve it or not. So it doesn't matter how many credit points. I personally don't care. It's about making sure that your course coordinator approves it. Okay, that's all that matters.
All right. So, Moluk Gezwani, hi Noor, can I have your mail ID and there is any good example of EOI application? So EOI application, the examples are already there. When I say examples, you've got CV examples or your cover letter examples. The EOI is a form. You don't need an example for that. It's just basic questions that will basically help us create a repository on our central database for us to access every time when we need information from you guys for whatever reason. So that's the answer to there. Mail ID, I am a staff member, so you can just literally put my name in and you will see my email. But for whatever reason, I will put it into the chat box. All right, is there a precedent for students doing will interstate? Are there rules against that? Now, COVID-19 and all of that, but I'm going to let Eddie speak about that a little bit more.
Yeah, so right now we're in stage 4 lockdown. We don't know what's going to be like by the time you guys start entering the companies. Hopefully, things will be better in January. Steve also spoke to this topic much earlier on. Right now, the precedence is to stay away from anything interstate if you don't want to take that risk, right? Because the likelihood of the government saying, okay, yeah, there's no strict restrictions here now, but we don't want anyone going overseas. That's one thing. The second one is interstate. And the third one is Trobe University, OHS and various safety people might say, we don't want anyone going interstate. We're not going to approve that enrollment. That can happen. We fought, very hard to make sure that certain students who were on placement in semester 1 didn't get their placements cancelled because of COVID. And that worked. But we can't keep doing that all the time because we don't know how the university will react. There's a lot of risks involved in doing that. So the simple answer to that is try to find something in Victoria if you can. But if you find something fantastic, outside of Victoria, we'll consider it. But we have to be smart about it. Zan, I think you understand what I mean by that. We have to look at whether less risks are involved to make sure that students actually get a good experience, but we don't expose them to unnecessary, OHS. So That's it for that one.
This one's a really good question. I actually like this one. In case I get rejected after the final interview in a university source placement, will I still be eligible to begin with a self-source placement? So that's good, because you are. Yes. You are self-source. As I said, self-source, even for whatever reason, if you can get self-source, do it. We highly recommend it. So even if you get rejected, and obviously before January, which is the start date, if you can, get in contact with us and say, hey guys, I've got this self-source placement, then that's fine. Can
I also add a comment to that? So guys, once you go through the final interview, and if you don't get through, it's happened before, rather than just sitting there and waiting. We had 3 students a couple of years ago who were rejected, and they had 3 interviews, or 2 or 3 interviews, and they got rejected in all of them. Obviously, they didn't improve on the first one either. They just kept going to the next one like nothing happened, which is fine. That's your choice. But after you got rejected the second and third time, you probably realized, I'm probably not going to get a placement. That was in November. From November until middle of February, they did not bother chasing any companies. They were just waiting. I'm not sure what they were waiting for, but they were waiting. You could have used that summer period to source your own placement and say, no, Eddie, it's January. I found my own company. I used that time wisely. So you have a second stab at getting companies if you don't make it through. You use that time. You can self-source before, and you can self-source after the interview stages if you've made it through that particular phase. Use the time wisely. So very good question, and hopefully that answers your question as well.
And the other way of looking at it is we look at this as a pool of students that are coming up, and our goal is to get everybody placed. So don't worry that if you indicate that you might be interested in self-sourcing, that we're just going to suddenly ignore you and not try to place you. Our goal is to get you placed. So don't worry about that being a risk as well. If you're trying to self-source and you haven't had any luck, like Noor said, we still have you on our list, and our goal is to try to get you placed with possibly one of our partners. So yeah, there's definitely levels of flexibility there.
I want to answer this question, but also just for, all 61 students, the 8 or 9 students that obviously left for whatever reason. I don't know why, but this is the part where, I go a little bit above and beyond. So, and I know Eddie does too. This is where you can add us or add me on LinkedIn, on my Facebook. I'm totally comfortable with that. And what that allows us is just to communicate instantly. So instead of emails, I can reply back to you guys very, very quickly. Sometimes very quickly, just depending obviously on what I've got. But on LinkedIn and on Facebook, what that allows us is to communicate instantly, especially if you're needing a little bit of advice or you've got a self-source and you need to tell me what's up. It's a lot better than waiting, on email. We get tons of emails every day, and sometimes there is a 24-hour to 48-hour turnover period for me to reply back to that email. But if I've got you on, my Facebook or my LinkedIn, and you say to me, hey, Noor, just a heads up, this has happened. I've got a self-source. What do I do next? I already know that's the first thing I will action in the morning, instead of looking at an email chain and I've got other priority emails coming from my bosses, which I need to action first. So just a heads up on that. And I guess this is why the program has worked so well. We create friendships with all of you. All of you become our friends, because we have this idea that, will in the next 10 years, you guys will be recruiting our students. So the students that we will have, you guys will be their bosses. And we're already seeing that. We're seeing that from the examples we have before. We have students giving us a call saying, hey, I've just been promoted. What do you think I should do? Or, hey, Adi, hey, Noor, I've just been given this position and this is my salary package. What do you think I should do? How should I negotiate it? So we become mentors in some way, shape or form. So please count us as that. Obviously that we are all very professional. I've had some students in the past previously become very, very rude to me. Those students just will end up not really liking the other side of me. And those students will not end up succeeding anyway because of they've got attitude issues. And a lot of these organizations, I had one student who, caused a little bit of an issue for both Eddie, myself and Steve. We ended up placing him within that organization and he just did shit. It was just an attitude issue. So we gave him an opportunity and he was horrible. So it tells us a lot about how you are. So patience, respect will get you a long way in our program. And things just don't happen instantly, guys. We get emails like stressing out, going, oh, what's happening? Why haven't I got this? you've got to remember we're doing, 50, 60 students. We're doing 6-month placements. These are big things to ask, and there's only 3 of us, and we've got other things to also do in our jobs. So just a heads up on that, I guess. But I'll go back to the question because I did diverge a little there. When you are self-sourcing, does the company have to provide one project for the term, or is it acceptable to work with a company on multiple projects?
I'm going to answer that one?
Yes, go for it.
Okay, so there's 2 different things going on. In your company, you can work on hundreds of projects, right? We don't dictate to the company, hey, the student's coming, so therefore you should have one project. Not at all. You have to separate these 2 things. You have the day-to-day tasks, which could be projects that last for 3 days or projects that last for 3 years. And I'll give you examples. Students that work on the metro tunnel, right? The tunnel project. This is a project that's going to last for years, right? But there are sub-projects in a major project that broke down. So you could come into that particular company and only see the planning phase of the project. Someone comes in 2 years later and is looking at the execution part of the project, right? Within that frame, you will pick one topic that you will research as part of the academic assessment. If the academic assessment project is closely aligned with what you do day to day, that's a perfect scenario, but it doesn't have to be the only one. You could work on something and research it outside. So I'll give you one concrete example. One of our students worked at Campbell's, right? Campbell's, if you don't know them, they do all sorts of stuff, but in Central Victoria, they make soups, right? Those pre-made soups, canned soups, et cetera, et cetera. Sounds like a boring thing. There's so much engineering in that it'll blow you away how much precision there is. But one of our students was involved in commissioning a new production line, okay? For those of you that are in manufacturing or industrial engineering. That means they were decommissioning, they have multiple lines of manufacturing, right? Producing the content. And they were decommissioning one line, which was producing, I don't know how many liters of soup per minute, to a new line with new technology that had better precision, less losses, more efficiency in the system, better packaging, the whole lot. It was just less prone to errors. So they needed to decommission this line and commission a new line. Seems like a pretty straightforward thing to do. Well, it's not. It's not like taking a washing machine and replacing it with a new washing machine, because there's a lot more to it. There's several aspects you have to take into consideration. You have to take into consideration, if I disconnect this production line here, not even touching the technology, how many losses will I take while this new line is being commissioned? You have to plan things ahead. How does the new equipment produce the same product with the same taste, with same everything when you replace it, right? There's a lot of stuff involved there. And that's not even getting into the engineering, power requirements, mechanical requirements, civil requirements, safety requirements. There's a whole lot of stuff. That's not even getting into the actual bits and pieces of technology. So there is research to be done in how to effectively decommission a piece of equipment, recommission a new piece of equipment. That becomes a research project. Now, the company is not going to say, oh, well, Mr. Student, why don't you take 6 months to do that for us because that's a student project. No, 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 no. The company will say, we need this done in 2 weeks. So that means you might do some research for a couple of days to figure out what to do, but you can stretch that research project for your own purposes as part of will to write up a thesis. But what you do for the company might only last for a couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months, but you stretch it out because you can dig deeper. You can say, okay, I didn't have 6 weeks, 6 months to research this thing. I had to do it in a couple of days, but there's a lot more to it. How are the other companies around the world decommissioning and commissioning new equipment? What are the industry standards? Are there any research papers based on this? So you form a hypothesis on how this should be done. And then you deliver the expectations based on that. So project and what you do in the company don't necessarily have to be perfectly aligned. In fact, you'd be very lucky if they're perfectly aligned, but you work with your supervisors to do that. So I know it's a little bit confusing and a little bit strange to be able to do that, but the company cannot suffer as a result of you having an assessment piece. The assessment piece can attach to what you do, but it can run in parallel. Of course, it should make some connection with what you're doing in the job. You shouldn't be researching bridges if you're working in a company that's building tunnels, right? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Leverage the knowledge in-house, and I think that will help you a lot. Next question.
When you are self-sourcing, does the company have? Oh, sorry.
No.
That's all right.
Does your area, you live in Melbourne, influence which
Yes.
location you get placed?
Yeah.
You just clicked answer on that question, and you stuffed that up. Not sure why you did that.
No, wait.
Okay, don't worry about it. I'll go back to the question. The question, stop clicking done now. So I can't see the questions. The question was related to your location and getting a position. So you don't have a choice where you get placed. You can have a preference, but the final decision is made by us, right? Of course, we're going to look into if you prefer one or the other. You actually have an option of selecting in the form whether you are happy to relocate or not relocate, right? My advice to you is this. If you say, I don't want to relocate, you are narrowing down the positions that are available to you by probably 50%, right? And that's fine. If you say, no, under no circumstances I'm going to relocate, that's fine. We're not going to push you to relocate, but keep an open mind. You cannot say, I just want to work in southeastern suburbs, okay? I live in the west, but I work in Bandura. So I travel, 45 minutes to 1 hour to get to my job. If I lived 2 hours from where I'm working, I would probably move and I would actually relocate physically to that location. But I've worked internationally. So I don't say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take that job in Japan. It's paying $200,000 because I live in St. Albans in western suburbs. That's not going to happen, okay? You need to be ready to relocate to get the experience. But if there's some specific reason why you can't do that, fine. Just select, I don't want to relocate. But it doesn't play a role in us selecting the company. Next question. Is there any guidance and requirement for the company profile in self-sourced case? Not sure what you mean by that, Malik. I'm not sure if no one understands that question better than I do.
Is there any guidance or requirement for the company profile? I don't understand that. Maybe if you want to
please clarify that question in more detail. Go to the next question.
All right.
Please tell us a bit more about the big interview.
Very, very simply put, it is an interview that is done virtually. You'll be asked 4 questions and you'll need to answer these 4 questions. You'll have 2 or 3 minutes to answer each question. Then you will submit a link into the submission link on LMS for us to review. I don't think there's anything else to basically, it's not complex or it's not anything crazy. There's nothing really else to tell you about the big interview. All of you as students of Trobe University have access to it. And it's actually a good tool to train on, so you guys prepare yourselves for jobs or placements.
Yep, that's it. Zan, given the current circumstances, what's your advice for starting to find and reach out to companies? LinkedIn post to your network would be a good starting point, but what about reaching out to companies? Okay, we could probably spend an hour or 2 hours talking about this one here. So I think I'm going to prefer to run a separate session on reaching out to companies and how to do that. We'll organize something next week, probably the same time. I'll organize another session to do that one. But there are so many different ways to do that, right? And Zan, you've already landed some internships before and you're very communicative. So I don't think you're necessarily going to have some problems in doing that. But let me run a separate session on that next week and show you some of the techniques that I would use to do that, okay?
All right. So Abdullah, I know Abdullah, I've spoken to you a couple of times. I've had an understanding with Bandita regarding doing hydraulics whilst doing Will. I won't have any problems moving forward, will I? ? So in my opinion, we've already spoken about it. I said to you, look, if Bandita has already approved it, but once again, I don't make the final decision. You need to speak to your course coordinator just to get approval. They'll send us an email. I'm sure your course coordinator will understand. But once again, as Eddie did say before, if you can both, and I'm sure that the twice I spoke to you, once on the phone and once you came to my office, I said to you, if you can handle both the workload when doing work integrated learning and doing hydraulics, then that's fine. But please understand that there is a massive workload. So I'm sure I've already had this discussion with you, but just for final approval, please get this final approval done by the course coordinator.
Can I answer the next question about the WAM and just explain something? So yeah. Isaac, good question, but I'll clarify it once and for all. Companies don't actually care about your academic results. I know it's something that you are shocked to hear, but honestly, they don't give a shit, right? Companies care about whether you can deliver value to them, and that's the only thing they care about. And as Noor mentioned, when you come out of high school, right, into university, it's a bit of a shock. You're not really prepared for how the whole thing is arranged. Some students, work it out very quickly, some don't. Some students are trying to find their feet, some already have. So your academic results are not always a reflection of your intellectual capacity. They're certainly not they're not a direct showcase of your, let's say, enterprising skills, the ability to work in a company or how dedicated you are. There are various reasons for that. And I'll tell you one thing, that second year, when I studied second year, I decided to watch more football, and that was the World Cup at the time. And so therefore I failed 4 subjects in second year. I don't tell people that, but I'm going to tell you guys right now. I failed the entire second year. I repeated the whole thing. Not because I didn't know how to do it, just because at the time my mind was elsewhere. Plain and simply put, shit happens. But what really stands out about individuals is how you bounce back from that. And if you think your wham is an indicator of your capacity, then you got to work on that. But if you think your wham is 65 or lower because you didn't put the effort in, let's face it, most of you don't put the effort in to really reach a higher grade. You just do enough. But now is the time to do a lot more, because now is the final selling point. So forget about your wham for a second and think about what you can offer the company. What makes you stand out? Are you hungry for success? What are you willing to do to get to that level of success? That will be compensating everything that you didn't do so well. You did well here, but you didn't do well in maths. You liked this subject, but you didn't like that subject. None of that really matters. What did you actually learn, and what can you actually showcase to the company? That's most important. But attitude is always number one, because if you have a good attitude about learning things, then you can learn anything. But if you think because you got good grades in an exam or a subject, but you have a shitty attitude, the company's not going to take you on, because they'll be like, this guy's going to be difficult to work with. He doesn't listen, right? He doesn't have a good attitude. It's not going to take you on, plain and simply put. So long answer short, the wham is not the number one consideration, especially when you're self-sourcing, because the company won't even know what those subjects mean, right? They won't care about it. So plain and simply put, don't worry about your wham, worry about yourself. How you appear, how you present, what you can offer, what value, and how hungry you are to get to that position. That's all that matters.
All right. So this next question, I think, is also a good question. Is if I want to get, it's the Malik's rephrasing. If I want to go for a self-source will, is there any criteria for the selection of the company to apply for? Like, company should be big enough in terms of staff or turnover, or company should be big or something. Now, we're not going to be that pedantic, but please use your logic. So if you're going to work for an organization that, doesn't follow any protocols and is just a one-man show and doesn't have an ABN and is doing some consulting work privately, then we already know that's not an organization you need to work for. Or if you're working for an engineer because the word engineering is thrown around a lot. Some of them are not qualified or even registered engineers, especially 10, 15 years ago. Everybody just can come up, they do some course and they're like, yep, I'm an engineer, or I have an engineering company. That's not the case. So we will be pedantic about, all right, who is your supervisor? Do they have qualifications? If it's not your supervisor, the experience you're currently undertaking, we will come to the place on our site visits and we will investigate. We'll have a look. Is there any engineering, or is there no engineering at all? So we will assess these organizations. So please use logic. You want to be an engineer that gets experience. You just don't want to be doing something that, the next company you interview for will probably call and look at and investigate and be like, well, this isn't a company that looks appealing for us to recruit you from. This experience is invalid. So don't put yourself into a situation like that. But in regards to turnover, how many staff members, no, we're not that pedantic. But there is a certain level where you've just got to use logic and say, well, this is, some back of the home consulting business with no qualifications at all, which we won't accept. So once again, logic, and I know Eddie will probably comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, there's one more thing there, which is you can look at the easiest option. So you can look at will as two things. You can look at it as a way of getting yourself into an industry, professionally developing yourself, or you can look at it, oh, this is just an easy way to get 60 credit points rather than doing 4 subjects. If you're looking at it that way, you're choosing Will for the wrong reason. Because most people who do it that way, and there are a few that do it that way, right? I have a cousin who has a small little business and I'm going to work for him. That's fine. But you're not doing yourself any good because you're not setting yourself up to get a job. You're shooting yourself in the foot. And if you think, oh, but I'll put more effort in later on, believe me, it's going to get harder later on. This is your one golden chance. When I was a student, this stuff was not around. Absolutely no one gave a shit about students when I was a student, except for the student. Right now, you guys have a lot of resources available to you and you need to use them. So make sure that you end up in a company that is respectable, that you can actually learn something in. Of course, you're going to learn anything and anywhere, but at the end of the day, there are some places where you set yourself up for more learning than others. So don't go for some sort of backyard operation, civil engineering company or mechanical company, whatever that might be. Look for something more reputable. It sets you up for a better career path later on. Okay, that's what I want to say now.
All right. So Labib has asked the question. Sorry. The projects.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay. All right. So just yes for Labib's question. Now, anonymous. Do we only need to submit our CV later, or do we need to submit our resume as well? So please, CV and resume are the same thing. CV, curriculum vitae, or however you want to pronounce it, is just the Latin word for it. Please.
Maybe he's getting confused. Cover letter and CV.
Oh,
right. So maybe, I'm not sure what the intention was, but yeah, as Noor said, CV and resume are the exact same thing, but cover letter or motivational letter, was some cultures call it, and a CV are 2 different things. So if you met one or the other, hopefully that clarifies it, but you submit them now with your expression of interest.
All right. Now, Ben Thomas, will we receive feedback from the big interview to improve our interviewing skills before we interview with a company for our placement? Now, this is, no, simply why we just don't have the time to go through all 60 students on big interview, give them feedback.
Well, 60 students, no, it's going to be like 150 students.
Yeah, sorry, that's right. That's right. That's the students who get into the program. So it's more students that we have to filter. So the reason, we would love to do it. We've been asked if we could do it, but knowing that you guys have gone through EEP and ITI, we know that you guys should be prepared to take on these interviews as a bare minimum. So unfortunately, we just don't have the time to go through all those.
But you can ask people to do a mock interview with you, right? Mock interviews you can set up yourself. So if you don't have a mentor, you should definitely get yourself a mentor, right? And the mentor can run you through an interview scenario. You can interview each other. Okay, the question is, how well can someone provide feedback if they're a student? Well, probably not very well at all because they don't have a lot of experience, but you at least get into the situation where you have to answer certain questions and you see how much you sweat over certain answers and not. But find yourself a mentor and go through that. Okay, that's important.
All right, Abhishwa has a good question with regards to self-sourcing. Will they have to pay $10,000 to the university? There are some companies that are willing to take me on without pay. So that's a double barrel question. So the first part to that question is the $10,000 scholarship, if you're a self-sourcing student, depends on how you pitch your self-sourcing to them. So you can say to them, hey guys, there's 2 options. And it depends what your pitch is going to be. It's, do you guys want me as a student for 6 months being paid directly, which is going to cost you X amount? Or do you want to pay, $10,000 for me for the next 6 months, which can be paid by a scholarship? And then the company, and then depending on how the company wants to proceed, if they want to go down through the scholarship end, what happens very quickly is you put them in contact with me, and then I explain to them how the dynamics of that works. And I've done this multiple times. If for whatever reason the company has, students from RMIT, Melbourne, and Monash, and they're paying them directly, then they will just eventually have to pay you directly. So it can be fair and equitable. So the second question was Abhishwa had was in regards to companies are willing to take me on for free. Now, don't undersell yourself. You're going to an organization for 6 months. So why would you undersell yourself when you're finishing your undergraduate degree? You want to obviously be paid to support yourself through this learning experience. So why would you undersell yourself? You only use that in extreme circumstances. That's why I've said in my PowerPoint before, I said anything about unpaid scholarships will be used in extreme cases depending on what happens with COVID. So I think right now with the rules being let loose a little bit, and now you having a little bit more skills to go self-source, you can pitch to companies for 2021 to get on board and be paid the $10,000 scholarship. That's my personal opinion. I think Eddie can obviously comment more about that.
No, I think you said it all, no. So there's not much to be said about that, except the fact that, you know, we can be flexible. The companies can be flexible, and you can also be flexible. But think about logically what puts you in the best possible position to get what you want, but also satisfy the other stakeholders, right?
There's something you can do. Sorry to interrupt you, Eddie. What we've done is you can have a 1-month review. So you can work for an organization and you can tell them this, even better. You can say, I will work for you for a month, and then you can decide whether to take me on for the 5 months and pay me the $10,000 scholarship, or you can just say, you know what, let's do a 3-month stipend-free internship. There are a couple of ways you can sell it, but we just recommend very simply, you're a 6-month scholarship. There's a $10,000 scholarship associated with it, and worst comes to worst, if you really want to pitch it, you say, why don't you take me on for a month? Don't pay me anything. Have a look at how I do within your organization, and then you can pay me the $10,000 scholarship, and we can actually have this on our legal agreements. So you will be protected to some degree.
All right, I think we've answered pretty much all the questions, so I don't think we need to do any more. I'm sure there's other stuff that will pop up, guys, but I think we're reaching we've passed 2.5 hours, and happy to hang around and answer more questions, but we're going to run 2 sessions. So I'll go back to that question that Ben Thomas asked, which is the interviews. So big interview, we're not going to give you any preparation for that one. You just need to go into that and figure out what you need to do. It's plain and simple. That's an internal thing. After we've ranked you, after we've done our part, I promise we will run a session on how to get the maximum out of your interviews before we send you to the companies. We often do some of that for some people that we feel we're really concerned about. If we feel like you're good already, we're not going to bother. But if we feel like you need some fine tuning, we will run some special sessions after that for you, even though that's the job of careers at Trobe University. But often students go to careers and they say, oh, Eddie, can you do it for us? Well, careers needs to take responsibility of it. So careers can do that part for you. If you feel they're not doing a good enough job for whatever reason, or not tuning it to you, then you need to speak to careers. But we will try our best to give you as much input as we can, keeping in mind that, you know, academic work does not involve that at this university. We do that because we want to help you. And all these extra sessions that we run, certainly not part of the academic workload that we have. So please take that into account, that we're going above and beyond to help as much as we can. It's just not on the menu in the engineering department. So let's see how you go in these big interviews, okay? Most of you actually do quite well in your big interviews, the undergraduates, because of the cultural shift. Postgraduate students, please heed this warning. You need serious work with interviews, because obviously English is not your first language, which is a challenge to start with, but you can do such little things to improve your ability to interview. Practice, 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 dress the part. When you're doing the big interview, don't come wearing a t-shirt or something else for that matter. Dress professionally. It's like a real interview. We want to see what you're wearing, how you're behaving, how you're speaking, what your eye contact is, body language, the lot. The microphone needs to be clear, the audio needs to be clear, and the video needs to be clear as well. So don't think of this as, oh yeah, it's just an internal thing. We'll rank you lowly, and then you'll be on the bottom of the pile. So don't do that.
Yeah, we've seen some really awful big interviews, a lot of distortion in the background, sound, yelling in the background.
Just interviewing in darkness. We
in
have
darkness,
two
not having
at nighttime interviewing. Can't even see their faces. So
what I hate also, and I'll be honest with you, what I absolutely hate is you writing your answer on a Word doc and then you just reading it. That is so obvious to us. A lot of people just think that we're not going to pick it up. We can see what your eyes are doing, and we can see the reflection in your eyes, literally. So why would you do it? It's not. We want you to see how it's like to be put onto the spot. So why write the questions and come up with a script? It makes no sense. If you do have a script, at least memorize it and let it come fluently like an actor does. But
there's an even more important part there, which is if you fake the first one and somehow manage to get past Nora and I, which is very unlikely because we've been doing this for a very long time. But if you do, right, you have a big teleprompter in front of you and you're reading it like, you know, Donald Trump was in his RNC speech. If you do that and you somehow get through, you're not going to be able to do that in the company interview. So all that's going to mean is when you get to the company interview, you're going to perform very poorly and you're not going to get very far at all. So why do it? You're better off doing it poorly now and having some input than doing it poorly over here. Because over here, it's a disaster. Over here, you can at least get some input. So don't do that. Be natural. People want to see how you behave naturally, how you answer questions naturally, not written down. I don't have a script here that I'm reading to give you this information. The slides are just guides. We went completely off script and that's natural. So people want to see that. So be natural in your interview. Don't go reading stuff off the screen.
Yeah. So yeah, guys, we're here. Please utilize us. Also, this is specifically to the international students, and it's not to sideline you guys at all. And I know you guys are on different WhatsApp groups, but the students that have registered and thought that, you know, that they can just not come because they have a friend here who's reading all of this, and then you say, you send them something on the WhatsApp group. I already know who those students are because they're sending me emails saying, hey, can you give me some more information about work integrated learning? And I already know those are the students that are not here because I've given all the information on this webinar. And if you can't even do that, what are the chances of you getting a job?
Yeah, we're not answering questions that have already been answered in this webinar.
Absolutely. So if you are one of those students that is sending something in that WhatsApp group, and once again, this is just me speculating, I could be completely wrong, and I do apologize in advance if I am. But I have, as I said, I was a student, so I do remember what some students would do, and I can see that the same actions keep happening and happening. So those students, please tell them that, you know, Noor and Eddie know who you are, and you guys will not get any extra information. You guys will be directed right back to the LMS page on Engineering Hub, and you will have to reread everything and watch the webinar because this will be going up there. But yeah, any more question, guys, please put them in. I'm happy to stay on until about 2 o'clock and then go for my lunch break, because I think we've been doing 2 hours straight, 2.5 hours straight. We started at 11, didn't we? 2.5
hours. I feel like at a concert.
You know, it does feel like a concert.
I think that's pretty much it. Most people, is there one more question here? I can say, okay, are we allowed to edit the videos we upload for the interview?
No.
And you don't actually get to do that because it's embedded. Right? That's not the point. Are you going to be able to edit your answers at a company interview? You're not. What you say on the spot is what is recorded on the spot. So
you only have one crack.
Only one crack. That's it.
Simple. That's simple.
All right, guys, that's it. We want to cut it off here because I've got to upload this video on YouTube. So the longer it goes for, the more time it's going to take to render. Thanks everyone for attending the session, especially the 56 people that stayed on for the 2.5 hours. Dedication. Drive. I think most of you are going to be fine. Just put the time and effort in. And this is your swan song, right? Use this opportunity to get yourself, you know, through the door at a company that you want to work in, or some industry that you want to work in. And that's it. From there on in, you're coaching other people. So this is the last hurdle in your career. Good luck. And please let us know if you need anything else. But also point the finger to this presentation to others that weren't here, because we won't answer questions that are already answered. Thanks, Noor. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Lauren, as well. And thanks, everyone else, for attending. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.